After 30 years in the shadows taking bullets for this country, I came home to find my wife on her knees scrubbing mud off another woman's heels. That woman was wearing shoes bought with my money, living in a mansion paid for with my blood. My wife did not even know my name, and my own son threatened to call the cops on me because he thought I was a beggar. I did not scream and I did not fight. I simply activated the protocol, because sometimes the only way to save your family is to destroy the people controlling it. Before I tell you how I dismantled their lives piece by piece, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight a war inside your own home. My name is Silas Thorne. For 3 decades, the world thought I was a logistics consultant for an import-export firm. In reality, I was a ghost. I led a black ops unit that did not officially exist. We handled problems that the government could not acknowledge. I missed birthdays, I missed anniversaries, I missed my son Damon's graduation. I did it all to build a fortress of safety for them. I sent every paycheck into a blind trust fund called the Archangel, designed to give my wife Clara a life of queens. When I finally retired last week with shrapnel in my knee and a new face reconstructed after a blast in Belgrade, I thought the war was over. I was wrong. The war was just beginning. I stood outside the wrought iron gates of the estate in the Hamptons. It was exactly as the brochure had looked 30 years ago when I bought it through 3 shell companies. $15 million of limestone and glass overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. But the hedges were overgrown and the paint on the east wing was peeling. Neglect. That was the first red flag. A soldier notices neglect because neglect gets people killed. I adjusted the strap of my canvas duffel bag. It contained everything I owned. A few changes of clothes, a fake passport, and a combat knife I had carried since Vietnam. I looked like a drifter, a 73-year-old black man in a faded army jacket standing in a neighborhood where the average car cost more than most people earn in a decade. The gate was unlatched, security breach number 2. I walked up the long driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from anticipation. I was finally going to see Clara. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in the jungles of Colombia and the deserts of Syria. I would hold her. I would explain why I had to stay away. I would tell her we were finally free. Then I saw them. In the courtyard near the fountain, 2 women were standing. One was sitting on a marble bench scrolling through her phone. That was Juliana, my daughter-in-law. I had seen photos of her in the dossiers my lawyer sent me. She was striking in a sharp, predatory way. Blonde hair pulled back tight, designer sunglasses, and a white dress that cost more than my first car. The other woman was on the ground. My breath caught in my throat. It was Clara. My Clara. But she looked so small. Her silver hair, which she used to wear in a proud afro, was matted and tied back with a rubber band. She was wearing a gray uniform that looked 2 sizes too big. She was scrubbing the toe of Juliana's red-soled heel with a rag. I stepped behind a large oak tree, instinct taking over. I needed to assess the threat level. "You missed a spot," Juliana said without looking up from her phone. Her voice was like grinding glass. "I can still see the mud. Do I have to teach you how to clean every single day?" Clara's hands were trembling. I watched her dip the rag into a dirty bucket of water. "I am sorry, Miss Juliana," she whispered. Her voice was weak, raspy. Not the singing voice that used to fill our small apartment in Chicago. "I am trying my best." "Your best is pathetic," Juliana snapped. She kicked her foot out, slightly striking Clara in the shoulder. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to humiliate. "If these shoes aren't spotless in 5 minutes, you are not eating dinner tonight. And do not think about sneaking bread from the pantry again. I have cameras watching you." My vision blurred. A red haze settled over my eyes. I felt the familiar cold switch flip in my brain, the switch that turned off Silas the husband and turned on Spectre the commander. My hand went to the knife in my bag. I could cross the distance in 4 seconds. I could incapacitate Juliana before she could scream. But then the front door opened. A man walked out. He was tall, wearing a soft blue cashmere sweater and holding a glass of scotch. It was 2 p.m. Damon. My son. He had my eyes, but he didn't have my spine. He looked soft, doughy. He walked over to Juliana and kissed her on the cheek, completely ignoring his mother, who was still on her knees, scrubbing a shoe 3 feet away from him. Babe, the investors are calling again, Damon said, his voice whining. We need to liquidate another asset. Is the old man's pension fund dry yet? Juliana laughed a cruel, sharp sound. Dry as a bone. We drained that months ago. Just tell them we are selling the lake house. Or maybe we can sell some of Clara's old jewelry. Not that she has much left. Damon looked down at Clara with a look of pure annoyance. Mom, get up. You are embarrassing me. Why do you always have to act like a servant when we are outside? The neighbors might see. Clara didn't look up. She just kept scrubbing. I have to finish Damon. I have to pay my debt. He said I have to pay my debt. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out from behind the oak tree. My boots hit the pavement with a heavy thud. Damon spun around, spilling his scotch. Juliana jumped up, clutching her chest. Who the hell are you? Damon shouted. I stood there 10 feet away. I looked at my son. I looked for a flicker of recognition, but there was nothing. The facial reconstruction surgery I underwent in '98 after the embassy bombing had changed my jawline and nose. My hair was white now. I had lost 30 pounds. To him, I was just a stranger, an intruder. I am just a traveler, I said. My voice was gravelly deep. I used to know the family who lived here. Damon sneered. He looked me up and down, taking in my worn boots and the duffel bag. Well, they don't live here anymore. And neither do you. This is private property. I looked past him. I looked directly at Clara. Clara, I said softly. She stopped scrubbing. She lifted her head. Our eyes met. For a second, I thought she saw me. I thought she saw the 20-year-old boy who took her to the jazz club on 47th Street. I thought she saw the man who wrote her letters every week for 30 years. But her eyes were cloudy, empty. There was no spark, no recognition. It was the 1,000-yard stare, the look of a soldier who has seen too much and checked out of reality. Alzheimer's. The dossier hadn't mentioned this. Or maybe Damon had kept it from the lawyers. Who is that? Miss Juliana, Clara asked, shrinking back in fear. Is that the debt collector? Please tell him I am working hard. My heart shattered into a million pieces. It hurt more than the bullet I took in the shoulder in Mogadishu. She didn't know me, and worse, she was terrified. Get out of here, old man, Juliana hissed, stepping in front of Damon as if to protect him. Typical. You people always come sniffing around rich neighborhoods looking for handouts. Go back to the shelter before I call the police. Damon pulled out his phone. I am calling the sheriff. You have 10 seconds to get off my driveway. I looked at the three of them. The son I raised to be a man who was now a coward. The daughter-in-law who was a monster in designer clothes. And my wife, my queen, who had been reduced to a slave in her own kingdom. If I fought them now, I would lose. Not the physical fight. I could take Damon down with one hand. But I would lose the war. If the police came, I would be arrested for trespassing. My cover would be blown. I would have no legal standing. They had power. They had the narrative. I was just a crazy old veteran. I needed intel. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I needed to know where the money went. And most of all, I needed to know how to get Clara out without getting her hurt. I raised my hands slowly, showing my palms. No need for that, I said calmly. I am leaving. Just thought I could offer my services as a gardener. Looks like you need one. We don't hire vagrants, Juliana spat. I nodded slowly. I turned around. But as I turned, I pretended to stumble. I dropped my duffel bag. Oops, clumsy me, I muttered. As I bent down to pick up the bag, my hand moved with the speed of a magician. I pulled a piece of chewing gum from my pocket. Embedded in the gum was a listening device no larger than a grain of rice. High-frequency military-grade battery life of 6 months. I stuck the gum under the lip of the stone planter right next to where they were standing. I stood up and dusted off my knees. You have a nice day, folks, I said. And ma'am, I looked at Clara one last time, burning her face into my memory. You missed a spot on the left heel. I turned and walked away. As I reached the gate, I heard Juliana Sess' voice drift toward me. Did you see the way he looked at me? Disgusting. And you, Clara, get back to work. If that spot isn't gone in 2 minutes, you are sleeping in the shed again. I didn't look back. I walked down the street, my hands clenched in my pockets. I wasn't Silas the husband anymore. I was Spectre, and I had just marked my target. I walked 3 blocks to a public park and sat on a bench. I put a small earpiece in my ear and tapped the receiver in my pocket. The audio feed came online instantly. Crystal clear. I heard the sound of a door closing. Then I heard Damon S.'s voice. "I hate it when they come around here. It ruins the property value. By the way, did you transfer the funds from the charity account?" "Yeah," Juliana replied. "But we are running low, Damon. We need to sell this place fast. Once we sell it, we can dump your mother at that state facility in Jersey. The one the state runs for indigents. She won't know the difference." I sat there on the park bench as the sun began to set over the Hamptons. A cold wind blew off the ocean, but I didn't feel it. I felt only the cold burning rage in my chest. They were going to sell my house. They were going to throw my wife into a state-run asylum, and they were going to use my money to do it. I took out my phone. It was a burner encrypted. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 10 years. It rang once. "Yeah," a voice answered. Distorted. "It is Spectre," I said. Silence on the other end, then a shift in tone. Respect, command. "We thought you were dead." "I am not dead," I said, watching the lights of my mansion flicker in the distance. "But some people are about to wish they were. I need a full team. The hacker, the banker, and the cleaner." "We are running an operation on domestic soil," Target the voice asked. "Codename, The Gardener," I said. "Target is the Thorn Estate. We are not just taking the house back. We are burning their lives to the ground." I hung up. I looked down at my hands. They were old, scarred, but they were still steady. They wanted a gardener. They were going to get one. I was going to prune the weeds. I was going to rip them out by the roots. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. If you want to hear how I infiltrated my own home and turned their smart house into a haunted house of horrors, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what I found in the wall safe in the master bedroom. Part 2 is coming tomorrow. The static in my earpiece was the only sound in the cramped motel room I had rented 3 miles from the estate. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, listening to the lives of the people who had stolen mine. The bug I had planted under the stone bench was military grade, picking up conversations from 30 feet away with terrifying clarity. I heard the clink of ice in a glass. I heard the rustle of expensive fabric. And then I heard the laugh. It was Juliana. "So Miguel is gone," she said, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "I told you I would handle it, Damon." I leaned forward, pressing the receiver tighter against my ear. Miguel was the old gardener, a good man according to the neighborhood intel I had gathered. He had been working that ground for 10 years. "I still think it was risky," Damon mumbled. "What if he fights the theft charge?" "He won't," Juliana replied. "I planted the silver soup ladle in his truck myself. Who are the police going to believe? A wetback with a record, or the lady of the manor? Besides, he was asking for a raise. Imagine the audacity. Now we save $3,000 a month. My hand clenched into a fist. They hadn't just fired a man. They had framed him, destroyed his reputation just to save a few pennies to buy more scotch. This was their modus operandi. They saw people not as human beings, but as disposable assets, and if an asset became too expensive, they liquidated it. I realized then that my wife Clara was just another asset to them, a depreciating one. I turned off the receiver. I had heard enough. It was time for infiltration. I went to the bathroom sink and looked in the mirror. The face staring back at me was too sharp, too alert. It was the face of a commander who had led men into the valleys of Afghanistan. That man needed to disappear. I took out a razor. I shaved my head completely bald, removing the white stubble. I took a pair of thick tortoiseshell glasses from my bag, the kind with lenses so thick they magnified the eyes, making the wearer look confused and harmless. I put them on. I practiced the hunch. I dropped my right shoulder, letting years of phantom pain from an old shrapnel wound dictate my posture. I practiced the walk, a shuffle, a hesitation in every step. I wasn't Silas Thorne, the ghost of the CIA, anymore. I was Moses, just Moses, a man who looked like he had spent his life apologizing for his own existence. The walk back to the mansion took an hour. I approached the service gate this time. I rang the buzzer. When Juliana came out, she was wearing a tennis outfit, white and pristine. She looked at me through the bars like I was a stray dog she was deciding whether to kick or feed. "What do you want?" she asked, not opening the gate. I took off my hat, holding it against my chest with trembling hands. "I heard you might be looking for a gardener, ma'am. My name is Moses. I work cheap. Real cheap." Her eyes narrowed. She scanned me up down, assessing my worth. "How cheap is cheap?" "Cash," I said, keeping my head lowered. $5 an hour, and a place to sleep. Any place will do." I saw the greed light up in her eyes. $5 an hour was illegal. It was slave labor. But to a woman like Juliana, it was an irresistible bargain. She buzzed the gate open. "You are hired," she said. "But listen to me, old man. I have strict rules. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't come into the main house. And you work until the sun goes down. If I see a single weed, you are out on the street. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," I whispered, shuffling inside. "Thank you, ma'am." The first test came 10 minutes later. I was by the rose bushes, the prize-winning ones I had planted myself 30 years ago for Clara because she loved the smell of wild roses. I reached out to prune a dead branch, my hand moving instinctively to care for the plant. "Hey, Juliana!" His voice cracked like a whip. I froze. She marched over to me, her face twisted in disgust. She pointed a manicured finger at my hand. "Don't you ever touch my roses with those bare hands," she sneered. Her eyes were fixed on my skin, dark and weathered. "It is disgusting. Put on gloves. I don't want your black hands contaminating my flowers." The insult hung in the air, heavy and toxic. In my past life, I would have broken her wrist before she finished the sentence. I knew 14 different ways to incapacitate a target from this distance. The tiger inside me roared, clawing at the bars of my discipline, but Moses couldn't fight. Moses had to take it. I swallowed the rage, forcing it down into the pit of my stomach where I stored all my pain. "I am sorry, ma'am," I stammered, pulling a pair of dirty work gloves from my pocket. "I didn't mean no harm." "Just get to work," she huffed, turning her back on me. "And stay out of sight. We have guests coming tonight." I waited until she was gone before I let myself breathe. I looked at the roses. They were dying, covered in aphids, neglected just like everything else in this house. I carefully pruned the dead branch. "Hold on," I whispered to the plant. "I am here now." I spent the afternoon working the perimeter, moving closer and closer to the back of the estate. I needed to find where they were keeping Clara. I hadn't seen her in the main windows. The guest house was dark. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, I made my way to the old tool shed at the far edge of the property. It was a small wooden structure I had built to store the lawnmower and bags of fertilizer. It had no insulation, no heating. I reached for the handle of the shed, intending to get a rake. The door was locked from the outside with a heavy padlock. That was strange. Why lock a tool shed in a gated estate? I looked around. The coast was clear. I pulled a set of lockpicks from my pocket, hidden inside a hollowed-out marker pen. I had the lock open in 6 seconds. I pulled the door open, and the smell hit me first. It was the smell of damp earth mildew and stale sickness. It was the smell of a prison cell. I stepped inside, and my heart stopped. It wasn't a tool shed anymore. The lawnmowers were gone. In the corner on the cold concrete floor was a thin cot with a gray wool blanket. Next to it was a bucket, and on a small wooden crate sat a framed photograph. I walked over my legs, feeling like lead. I picked up the photograph. It was cracked, but I recognized it instantly. It was a picture of me and Clara taken the day before I deployed in 1995. We were smiling, young, and hopeful. I looked around the room. There were clothes hanging on nails, rusty nails driven into the wood. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling. A plate with half-eaten crusts of bread sat on the floor near the bed. This wasn't a room. This was a kennel. They were keeping my wife, the woman I had built this $15 million empire for, in a tool shed. They had locked her in with the fertilizer and the spiders while they slept in silk sheets upstairs. A noise behind me made me spin around. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the twilight. It was Clara. She was holding a basket of laundry, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. She didn't scream. She just trembled. "Please," she whispered, dropping the basket. "Please don't tell Miss Juliana I was late. I was just trying to get the stains out. Please don't let her lock me in the dark again." I looked at my wife, my queen, standing there begging a stranger for mercy in her own home. She didn't recognize me behind the glasses and the beard. She just saw another man who might hurt her. I wanted to rip off the disguise. I wanted to fall to my knees and tell her I was home. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I revealed myself now, Damon and Juliana would just call the police, claim I was a trespasser, and move Clara to somewhere I could never find her. They had legal custody. I had nothing but a fake name and a plan. I have to play the game. I have to be Moses. I stepped back, lowering my head, making myself small. "I ain't gonna tell no one, ma'am," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I fought to control. I am just the new gardener. I was looking for a rake. Clara let out a breath she had been holding. She stepped into the shed, picking up the picture of us from the crate where I had put it down. She wiped it with her sleeve lovingly. He is coming back, you know, she said to me, her voice suddenly dreamy and distant. My Silas. He is on a mission. A very important mission. He bought this house for me. He told me to wait here. She looked at the cold, damp walls as if they were covered in gold leaf. He wouldn't like it if he knew I was sleeping here, she whispered. But I have to pay the debt. Damon says I have to pay the debt, so Silas won't be in trouble when he comes home. The lie, the monstrous lie they had fed her. They were using her love for me to enslave her. They told her I was in trouble and that her servitude was the price of my safety. I clenched my jaw so hard I felt a tooth crack. He is coming, ma'am, I said, and when he gets here, he is gonna fix everything. Clara smiled a sad, broken smile. I hope he hurries. It gets so cold at night. She sat down on the thin cot, wrapping the gray blanket around her shoulders. I backed out of the shed. I closed the door. I didn't lock it. I pretended to fumble with the padlock, but left it unlatched. I walked away into the darkness of the garden. I went to the main power box on the side of the house. I opened it. I looked at the complex array of circuit breakers that controlled the smart home system. They wanted cold. I would give them cold. I pulled a small pair of wire cutters from my pocket. Juliana likes her temperature at 72 degrees. Tonight she is going to find out what it feels like to sleep in a shed. I cut the yellow wire feeding the master suite's HVAC unit. Then I stripped the insulation off the red wire and bridged it to the audio output channel. Let the games begin. If you want to see how I turn their high-tech paradise into a living hell, hit the like button. You won't want to miss what happens when the house starts whispering my name. The sun had not yet risen over the Hamptons, but the workday had already begun for the woman who used to own this estate. I watched from the shadow of the oak tree as Clara hauled a heavy wicker basket full of wet linens out to the drying line. The morning air was biting cold, the kind of damp chill that settles into your bones and stays there. Clara was wearing a thin cardigan that had holes in the elbows. Her breath plumed in the air as she reached up to pin a white sheet to the line. Her hands were red and swollen from the cold water. I gripped the handle of my rake until my knuckles turned white. In my mind, I was back in the mountains of Kandahar waiting for a target to emerge from a cave. But this was infinitely worse. That was war. This was torture. And the torturers were my own blood. I stepped out onto the grass, making sure my boots crunched loudly enough to warn her. I did not want to scare her. "Morning, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice low and raspy, my head bowed in the submissive posture of Moses the gardener. Clara jumped, dropping a clothespin. She spun around, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw it was just me, she let out a shaky breath and pressed a hand to her chest. "Oh, Mr. Moses," she whispered. "You gave me a fright. I thought it was—" She trailed off, glancing nervously toward the master bedroom window on the second floor. I noticed she did not say their names. She just looked at the window like it was the eye of Sauron. "That basket looks heavy," I said, taking a step forward. "Let me help you with those sheets. My back is old, but it is still strong." "No, no," she said quickly, stepping between me and the basket. "You can't. If Miss Juliana sees you doing my work, she will dock my pay. She says I have to earn my keep. Every penny." I stopped. The wind blew a stray lock of gray hair across her face. "Pay?" I asked gently. "Do they pay you well, ma'am?" Clara looked down at her worn-out shoes. They were canvas sneakers meant for summer, not for a New York November. "I don't get money, Mr. Moses," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I work to pay off the debt. The big debt." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "What debt?" "My husband," she said. And the way she said the word husband was filled with such a complex mix of love and shame it almost brought me to my knees. "Silas, he was a bad man, Mr. Moses." The world stopped spinning. "A bad man," I repeated, my voice hollow. Clara nodded, tears welling up in her cloudy eyes. "He left 30 years ago. He told me he was going to work for the government, but he lied. Damon told me the truth later. Silas was a criminal. He stole millions of dollars from the federal government. He was running guns and drugs. When he died," she choked back a sob. When he died in that explosion 10 years ago, the government came for everything. They were going to put me in prison. They were going to take Damon. She looked up at the house, shivering. But Damon saved me. He made a deal with the prosecutors. He took on all his father's debt, $15 million. He sold his own company to pay for it. He saved me from prison. So now I work. I work to pay him back. It is the least I can do after the mess Silas left us in. I stood there frozen. The lie was so absolute, so monstrous, that for a moment I could not breathe. Damon had not just stolen my money. He had stolen my legacy. He had turned my sacrifice into a sin. I had spent 30 years living in mud and blood, taking bullets and sleeping with one eye open to keep them safe and pure. And Damon had told her I was a drug runner. He had turned the hero she loved into a villain she had to atone for. He told her I was dead. That was the final nail. She wasn't waiting for me anymore. She was mourning a ghost she thought had betrayed her. I felt a tear slide down my cheek under my thick glasses. I quickly brushed it away, pretending to adjust the frames. "That sounds heavy, ma'am," I managed to say. "It is my cross to bear," Clara said, wiping her eyes with the corner of a wet sheet. "But Damon is a good son. He lets me stay here. He lets me help." Suddenly, the back door of the kitchen opened. We both froze. It was just the automatic sprinklers clicking on, but the fear on Clara's face was visceral. She quickly looked around, checking the windows. Then she did something that broke whatever was left of my heart. She reached into the pocket of her thin cardigan and pulled out a napkin. She unfolded it, revealing a dry crust of bread and half a boiled egg. "Here," she whispered, thrusting it into my hand. I looked at the food. It was clearly her breakfast. Maybe her lunch, too. "Ma'am, I can't." "Take it," she insisted, her eyes pleading. "You look so thin, Mr. Moses, and you are working so hard in the cold. Please, just don't let Miss Juliana see." She counts the eggs. She pressed the dry bread into my calloused palm and then turned back to the laundry, hanging the sheets with a frantic energy, terrified of being caught. I walked away. I walked until I was behind the cover of the hedges. I looked at the bread in my hand. It was stale, hard as a rock. But it was the most valuable thing I had ever held. Even now, believing I was a criminal, believing she was a slave, she still had kindness in her soul. She was starving, and she fed the gardener. I ate the bread. It tasted like ash and salt. With every bite, the rage inside me grew hotter. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage of a young soldier. It was the cold, calculated nuclear burn of a veteran. Damon Thorne was going to pay. He wasn't going to pay with money. He was going to pay with his sanity. I spent the rest of the day clearing dead leaves and mapping the perimeter. I located the external junction boxes. I found the fiber optic line that fed the house its internet. I found the backup generator. When the sun went down, the house lit up like a cruise ship. I could see them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Juliana was lounging on the white sofa, drinking wine. Damon was yelling at a sports game on the massive television. Clara was nowhere to be seen, presumably locked in the shed or scrubbing pots in the scullery. I waited until midnight. The lights went out one by one. At 0200 hours, I moved. I did not need a key. I did not need to hack a code. I went to the side of the house where the main utility entry was located. The lock on the service door was a standard 5-pin tumbler. Amateur hour. I was inside in 10 seconds. I moved through the basement silent as smoke. I found the server room behind a hidden panel in the wine cellar. This was the brain of the house. The smart home system that controlled everything: lights, temperature, security, music, locks. Damon was proud of this system. I had heard him bragging on the phone that he could control the entire estate from his iPad. Hubris. I opened the server rack. It was a mess of blinking lights and neatly bundled cables. A younger man would have pulled out a laptop and tried to crack the firewall. I didn't have a laptop. And I didn't want to crack the code. I wanted to break the machine's spirit. I pulled a pair of wire strippers from my pocket. I located the bundle of wires labeled HVAC Master Suite. I stripped a small section of the insulation on the temperature sensor wire. Then I located the wire for the external humidity sensor. I twisted them together. Now, whenever the humidity outside dropped, the system would think the master bedroom was overheating and would blast the air conditioning at maximum power. Next, I found the audio distribution module. I found the input for the intercom system. I stripped the wire and spliced it into the circuit for the basement sump pump. Now every time the sump pump kicked on, which happened every 20 minutes due to the high water table, the intercom in the master bedroom would emit a low-frequency hum, just at the edge of hearing, a sound that induces anxiety and paranoia. Finally, I went to the security system panel. I didn't disable it. I rewired the motion sensors in the hallway to the lighting control in the kitchen. If someone walked down the hallway at night, the kitchen lights would flash on and off in a strobe pattern. I closed the server rack. I left no fingerprints. I locked the door behind me. I went back to the shed, but I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness, listening. At 03:15, I heard it. The faint hum of the air conditioning unit kicking into overdrive. It was 30 degrees outside, but inside the master suite, it was about to become an icebox. 10 minutes later, I saw a light flicker in the upstairs window. Then I heard the scream. It was muffled by the double-paned glass, but I heard it. "Juliana, why is it freezing in here?" she shrieked. "Damon, fix it!" I leaned back against the cold wood of the shed wall. I took a slow, deep breath. The ghost had arrived, and he was just getting started. If you think freezing them out is too kind, wait until you hear what I did to their precious dinner party in the next part. You will not believe who I invited to the main course. Hit subscribe and let me know in the comments if you would have eaten that piece of dry bread. I am reading every single one of your stories. The first rule of psychological warfare is that you do not attack the enemy when they are awake and ready. You attack them when they are vulnerable, and the human mind is never more vulnerable than when it is deprived of sleep. In the Special Forces, we called it softening the target. You take away their comfort, you take away their rest, and pretty soon, the cracks in their personality turn into canyons. I was sitting in the tool shed at 0300 hours watching the small monitor I had rigged up connected to the hidden camera in the hallway. It was pitch black outside, and the silence of the Hamptons was heavy, but inside the master suite, chaos was brewing. I had set the thermostat to read a comfortable 72 degrees, but the reality in that room was a shivering 58. I had bypassed the sensor diverting the cold air from the intake directly into the vents above their bed. On the screen, I saw Juliana sit up. Even in the grainy night vision footage, I could see her shivering. She pulled the duvet up to her chin and slapped Damon, who was snoring beside her. "Damon, wake up," she hissed, her voice tinny through my earpiece. "It is freezing in here." "Did you leave a window open?" Damon groaned, rolling over. "Babe, go back to sleep." "It is fine." "It is not fine." Juliana snapped, kicking the blankets off. "My teeth are chattering. Check the thermostat." I watched as Damon stumbled out of bed and walked to the wall unit. I leaned in closer to the monitor. This was the moment. The gaslight. He looked at the digital display. "It says 72, Juliana," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "It is perfectly warm. You are just having a nightmare, or maybe it is menopause starting early." I chuckled softly in the darkness of the shed. "Strike one," Juliana shrieked, throwing a pillow at him. "I am 35 years old, you idiot. It is freezing. The system is broken. That stupid old house is broken just like everything else your father bought." That was when I activated Phase 2. I pressed a button on my burner phone which sent a signal to the audio inducer I had spliced into the sump pump circuit earlier. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a low-frequency hum, 19 hertz, the resonant frequency of the human eyeball. It is a sound you don't hear with your ears, you feel it in your bones. It causes unease, nausea, and the distinct feeling that someone is watching you. On the screen, Juliana froze. "What is that noise?" she whispered, looking around the room wildly. "What noise?" Damon asked, getting back into bed. "That hum. It sounds like someone breathing in the walls." Damon listened. I kept the frequency low enough that his sleep-addled brain wouldn't register it, but high enough to drive her hyper-alert senses crazy. "I don't hear anything, babe," Damon said, pulling the covers over his head. "You are losing it. Go to sleep." I watched Juliana sit there for the next 3 hours, hugging her knees, rocking back and forth, staring at the vents. Every time she started to drift off, I would pulse the frequency again. She didn't sleep a wink. By the time the sun came up, the woman who walked into the kitchen wasn't the pristine queen of the manor. She looked like a wreck. Her eyes were bloodshot, her skin was pale, and her hands were shaking. I was already in the kitchen pretending to fix a hinge on the back door. In reality, I was there to protect Clara. I knew that a predator in pain looks for something weaker to bite. Clara was at the stove cooking breakfast. Damon's eggs Benedict just the way he liked them. The smell of hollandaise sauce filled the room, but Juliana looked like she was about to be sick. "This coffee is cold," Juliana screamed, slamming her mug down on the granite island. Coffee splashed onto the floor. Clara jumped, nearly dropping the pan. "I am sorry, Miss Juliana, I just brewed it." "Don't lie to me, you useless old hag," Juliana spat. "You are doing this on purpose, aren't you? You and that gardener. You are messing with the house. The heat was off last night. I know it was." Clara turned around, her face full of confusion and fear. "Miss Juliana, I don't know how to work the thermostat. I sleep in the shed. Don't talk back to me." Juliana stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. I tightened my grip on the screwdriver I was holding. I saw the violence in Juliana's eyes. It was the look of someone who had lost control of their environment and needed to assert dominance over a living thing to feel powerful again. She marched toward Clara. Clara backed up until she hit the counter. "You think because you are his mother you are special," Juliana hissed, getting inches from Clara's face. "You are nothing. You are a debt, a liability, and if you can't even keep the house warm, maybe we should just put you out in the street right now." Damon sat at the table eating his eggs, ignoring the entire scene. "Coward." Juliana raised her hand. I saw the muscles in her shoulder bunch up. She was going to slap Clara, just like she slapped me at the wedding, just like she slapped the staff. I moved. To the untrained eye, it looked like clumsy old Moses tripping over his own feet, but it was a calculated kinetic sequence. I stepped forward with my left foot, driving my hip into the mop bucket that Clara had left by the island. My foot hooked the bucket with surgical precision, sending a wave of soapy water sliding across the polished marble floor exactly where Juliana was planting her foot to pivot into the slap. At the same time, I lunged forward, pretending to lose my balance, my shoulder checking Juliana's center of gravity just as her heel hit the water. "Whoa there!" I yelled, my voice cracking. It was physics pure and simple. Friction zero, momentum forward. Juliana's legs went out from under her. She didn't just fall, she flew. Her arms flailed wildly, trying to grab onto something, but there was nothing but air. She hit the floor face first with a wet, sickening slap that echoed through the high ceilings of the kitchen. Her chin cracked against the marble. The expensive silk robe she was wearing soaked up the dirty mop water instantly. "Oh, Lord, help me," I cried out, dropping to my knees, but making sure to land on the hem of her robe, pinning her to the wet floor for an extra second of humiliation. "I am so sorry, ma'am. My bad leg, it just gave out." Juliana screamed, a sound of pure rage and pain rolling over. Her nose was bleeding. Her hair was plastered to her face with gray dishwater. "Get off me!" she shrieked, kicking at me. "You idiot! You stupid, clumsy moron!" Damon finally looked up from his eggs. "Jesus, Juliana, are you okay?" She scrambled to her feet, slipping again slightly, her dignity completely shattered. She looked at me, and for a second I saw murder in her eyes, but she couldn't prove anything. It looked like an accident. It was the perfect accident. "You are fired," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Get out! Get out of my house!" "Wait," Damon said, standing up. "We can't fire him today, babe. The party is tonight. The lawn is still covered in leaves. If the investors see the yard looking like a jungle, they will think we are broke. We need him for one more day." Juliana wiped the blood from her lip, looking from Damon to me. She was trapped. She needed the appearance of perfection for the party, and she was too cheap to hire a real landscaping crew. "Fine," she spat. "But tomorrow morning you are gone, and take this old witch with you." She stormed out of the kitchen, leaving a trail of wet footprints. I stayed on my knees, head bowed, looking like a terrified old man. But under the thick glasses, I was smiling. I turned to Clara. She was staring at me wide-eyed, clutching her spatula. "Are you all right, Mr. Moses?" she whispered, ignoring her own near miss to worry about me. "I am fine, Miss Clara," I said, standing up and brushing off my knees. "Just clumsy. Old bones don't work like they used to." I reached out and gently took the spatula from her hand, which was shaking uncontrollably. "Why don't you sit down for a minute?" I said, my voice dropping to a lower, more soothing register. "I will clean up this water." Clara looked at the puddle on the floor, then at the door where Juliana had exited. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what happened. She was going to hit me. I saw it in her eyes." "She wouldn't dare," I said softly, but with a weight that made Clara look at me sharply. "Not while I am here." For a brief second, the fog in her eyes seemed to clear. She tilted her head, looking at my profile. "You sound—" she started, then stopped shaking her head. "Never mind. I need to finish the eggs. Damon wants more toast." I watched her turn back to the stove. She was still a prisoner, but for the first time in years she had a guard dog. I grabbed the mop. As I swirled the dirty water around, erasing the evidence of my tactical strike, I made a mental checklist. Phase 1, infiltration complete. Phase 2, psychological destabilization successful. Phase 3, the dinner party. Tonight was the big event. The investors were coming. The people Damon and Juliana needed to impress to save their crumbling empire. They wanted a perfect evening. They wanted to show off their wealth. I was going to give them a show, all right, but it wasn't going to be the one they planned. I looked at the pantry where the high-end liquor was stored. I thought about the little bottle of Ipecac syrup I had in my duffel bag, a powerful emetic used to induce vomiting, tasteless, odorless, and very fast-acting. Juliana wanted to treat my wife like a servant at the party. She wanted Clara to serve drinks in a ridiculous maid costume, while I was going to make sure the drinks were memorable. I finished mopping the floor. "Enjoy your toast, Damon," I whispered to myself. "It is the last good meal you are going to keep down for a while. If you want to see how I turned their $1 million gala into a disaster zone that had the guests running for the bathrooms, hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss the chaotic justice in Part 5. Let me know in the comments if you think Juliana deserved that fall." The driveway that night looked like a showroom for the morally bankrupt. Bentleys, Porsches, and a bright yellow Lamborghini that screamed overcompensation blocked the circular drive. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the desperation of people who spend money they do not have to impress people they do not like. Damon and Juliana had gone all out. They had rented high-top tables, hired a string quartet, and ordered cases of vintage champagne on credit. This was their Hail Mary pass, the Thorn Tech launch party. I watched from the shadows of the hedges, adjusting my thick glasses. To the guests, I was just Moses, the old gardener, shuffling around picking up stray napkins. To Damon and Juliana, I was invisible labor. But in reality, I was the reaper standing in the corner checking his watch. The goal of the night was simple for them: secure $5 million in seed capital from a group of angel investors for a software platform that did not exist. It was a Ponzi scheme wrapped in a slide deck, but that wasn't the crime that made my blood boil. The crime walked out onto the patio at 0700 hours. It was Clara. My breath hitched in my throat, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. They had dressed my 70-year-old wife not in an evening gown, not in a dignified suit, but in a costume, a French maid outfit. It was cheap polyester black with white lace trim, too short for a woman of her age and dignity. It was a mockery, a humiliation designed by Juliana to strip away the last shred of Clara's pride. Clara was holding a silver tray of champagne flutes. Her hands were shaking so hard the glasses chimed together like warning bells. She kept her head down, eyes fixed on the floor, trying to make herself disappear inside the ridiculous costume. "Look at that!" Juliana's voice drifted over the music. She was holding court near the fountain, wearing a red dress that cost more than my first house. We like to keep things traditional here. Even the help has a certain aesthetic, don't you think? The group of investors laughed. It was a cruel, hollow sound. One man stood out, a heavy-set guy with a face flushed from too much bourbon. Mr. Henderson. I knew his file. He made his money in pharmaceuticals, jacking up the price of insulin. A predator in a $3,000 suit. He reached out as Clara walked by, and instead of taking a glass, he grabbed her wrist. "Well, hello there," he slurred, pulling her closer. "You are a little vintage for the outfit, aren't you, sweetheart? But I like a woman with experience." Clara froze. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Please, sir," she whispered, trying to pull her hand away. "I am just serving the drinks." "Come on," Henderson laughed, tightening his grip. "Smile. You look miserable." He reached his other hand out and pinched the fabric of her skirt, lifting it slightly. The rage that exploded in my chest was white hot. My vision narrowed until all I could see was Henderson's thick neck. I calculated the distance. 12 feet. I could close it in 2 seconds. A strike to the larynx would crush his windpipe. He would be dead before he hit the ground. My hand moved to the trowel in my belt. I took a step forward, but then I stopped. If I killed him, I would go to prison. Clara would be left alone with Damon and Juliana. The house would be sold. The war would be lost. I forced myself to step back into the shadows. I uncurled my fist. Physical violence was too quick, too merciful. Henderson and Juliana deserved something that would last longer. something that would strip them of their dignity just as they had stripped Clara of hers. I looked down at the garden bed next to me. I had been cultivating a special patch of plants in the far corner of the yard since I arrived, Mucuna pruriens, the velvet bean. To the uneducated eye, it looks like a harmless legume, but the pods are covered in microscopic serotonin-filled hairs. In the jungle, we called it devil's fire. Contact with the skin causes an itch so intense, so maddening that grown men will scratch until they bleed. It doesn't kill you, but it makes you wish you were dead. I had harvested the hairs earlier that day, storing them in a small glass vial intended for a different scenario. But plans change. I shuffled toward the makeshift outdoor bar. The bartender, a college kid hired for the night, was distracted trying to open a bottle of wine. "Excuse me, young man," I mumbled, my voice trembling like old Moses. "Miss Juliana needs more ice." The kid didn't even look at me. "Yeah, whatever, man. Grab a bucket." I slipped behind the bar. I saw the row of special cocktails lined up on the counter. The signature drink of the night, the Tectonic, a blue monstrosity with a salted rim. I watched Juliana wave at the bartender, pointing to the tray. "Those are for the VIPs, she mouthed. I saw Henderson waiting. I saw Juliana waiting. With a sleight of hand I had perfected in the bazaars of Cairo, I uncorked the vial. I didn't put it in the drink. I dusted the rim of 3 specific glasses. The microscopic hairs blended perfectly with the coarse sea salt. 1 for Henderson, 1 for Juliana, and 1 for Damon just for being a spineless coward. "Here you go, sir," I whispered, sliding the tray toward the bartender. I retreated to the edge of the patio and waited. The weapon had been deployed. 5 minutes later, Damon tapped a spoon against his glass. The music stopped. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon announced, his voice booming with false confidence. "Thank you for coming. Tonight marks the beginning of a new era. To Thorntech." He raised his glass. Juliana raised hers, beaming like a shark. Henderson raised his, winking at Clara, who was cowering in the corner. They drank. I watched the salt touch their lips. I counted down in my head. 10, 9, 8. The reaction to velvet bean extract is not instantaneous. It takes a moment for the hairs to embed themselves in the mucous membranes of the lips and tongue. Damon frowned first. He rubbed his mouth with the back of his hand. Juliana took another sip, then touched her throat. She looked confused. Henderson let out a small cough. 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, Henderson dropped his glass. It shattered on the patio stones. He clawed at his neck, his fingernails digging into his skin. "What the hell?" he roared. "My throat. It's on fire." Juliana's eyes went wide. She started scratching her lips, messing up her perfect red lipstick. Then she scratched her cheeks, then her arms. "Oh my God," she screamed. "What is happening? Get it off me. Get it off." The itching sensation is not like a mosquito bite. It is like a million fire ants dancing under your skin. It triggers a primal panic response. Damon dropped his glass, splashing blue liquid all over his expensive suit. He was tearing at his collar, popping the buttons. "It burns," he yelled. "It burns!" The guests gasped, backing away. They thought it was a contagion, a virus. Henderson, the man who had humiliated my wife, fell to his knees. He was rolling on the ground, rubbing his face against the cold stone, trying to stop the sensation. He looked insane. He ripped his shirt open, scratching his chest until red welts appeared. "Help me!" he screamed. "I am dying! Someone call 911!" Juliana was running in circles, shrieking. She looked like a woman possessed. She grabbed a pitcher of ice water and dumped it over her head, ruining her hair, her makeup, her dress. But water doesn't stop the devil's fire. It only spreads it. The investors looked at the scene in horror. Their potential partners were writhing on the ground, scratching themselves like rabid animals. "This is disgusting," one of the women said, clutching her pearls. "Let's go, Harold." "Wait!" Damon gasped, crawling toward them, his face bright red and swollen. "Don't go! It is just an allergy. Do not touch me!" The investor yelled, kicking Damon's hand away. "You people are sick!" Within 3 minutes, the driveway was full of taillights. The Bentleys and Ferraris peeled out of there, leaving tire marks on the pavement. The checkbooks were closed. The deal was dead. I stood in the shadows, my face impassive. Clara was standing by the pillar, untouched. She looked at the chaos with wide, innocent eyes. She didn't know what had happened. She just knew that the man who had hurt her was on the ground crying. I walked over to her. In the mayhem, no one noticed the gardener. "Miss Clara," I said softly. She looked at me trembling. Mr. Moses, is it a plague? No, ma'am, I said. It is just justice. I took the heavy tray from her hands and set it on a table. Why don't you go to the shed and rest, I told her. The party is over. She looked at Juliana, who was now sobbing into the grass, her face a mask of red blotches. But who will clean up? Clara asked. They will, I said. They have plenty of time now. I watched her walk away safe into the darkness. Then I turned back to the patio. The ambulance sirens were wailing in the distance. Damon was vomiting into a potted plant. Juliana was screaming at the sky, cursing the caterers, cursing the wind, cursing everything but herself. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single velvet bean pod. I dropped it on the ground next to Henderson's shredded jacket. A calling card. They wanted to feel something. Now they felt everything. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what was coming next. Tonight I took their dignity. Tomorrow I would take their money. I walked back to the shed a ghost in the night. The first battle was won. But the war was about to get expensive. If you enjoyed watching these scammers scratch their way to bankruptcy, hit that like button. And make sure you are subscribed, because in the next part I am going to reveal the secret I found in Damon's hard drive that changed everything. You think the itching was bad? Wait until you see the jail time. The chaos outside on the driveway was a symphony of flashing lights and sirens. I stood by the window of the second-floor study looking down as the paramedics loaded Henderson onto a stretcher. He was still clawing at his neck, screaming about invisible ants. Juliana was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, wrapped in a shock blanket, her face swollen and red, sobbing into her hands while a medic tried to apply calamine lotion to her cheeks. Damon was pacing back and forth on the lawn, shouting into his phone, probably trying to do damage control with the other investors who had fled the scene. It was the perfect distraction. In the military, we call this a diversionary operation. You create a loud, messy spectacle in one sector to draw the enemy's eyes while you infiltrate the target in another. They were all looking at the ambulance. Nobody was looking at the house. Nobody was looking at the old gardener slipping into the master study. I closed the heavy oak door behind me and locked it. The room smelled of expensive cigars and leather, but underneath that rich scent was the stale odor of fear. This was Damon's sanctuary, the place where he played CEO. The desk was a massive slab of mahogany that cost more than my first car. On the wall hung a framed degree from a university I knew he had barely graduated from because I had pulled strings to get him in. I walked around the desk and sat in his leather chair. It felt wrong. It felt like sitting on a throne occupied by a usurper. I woke up his computer. It was password protected, of course. I pulled a small USB drive from my pocket. It wasn't a standard drive. It was a brute force decryption tool I had acquired from a contact in NSA cyber warfare unit back in 2010. Old tech, but against civilian security, it was like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. I plugged it in. The screen flickered black, then blue, then rows of white text began scrolling faster than the human eye could follow. While the code ran, I opened the top drawer of his desk. It was messy. Unpaid bills, final notices, a flask of whiskey that was half empty, and a bottle of prescription anti-anxiety medication. My son, the man who pretended to be a titan of industry, was drowning. The computer pinged. Access granted. I didn't waste time looking at his browser history. I went straight for the financial records. I needed to know about the Archangel. The Archangel was the name of the blind trust I had established 30 years ago. Every paycheck from every Black Ops mission, every hazard bonus, every drop of blood money I earned went into that account. It was managed by a firm in Zurich designed to release funds only for Clara's care and maintenance of the estate. It was supposed to be untouchable. $50 million, enough to keep Clara living like a queen for 10 lifetimes. I opened the banking portal. The interface loaded. Balance 0. I stared at the screen. I blinked, thinking maybe my old eyes were failing me, but the number remained the same. $0. I felt a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. $50 million. Gone. I clicked on the transaction history. It was a slaughter, a financial hemorrhage that had started 5 years ago, the week after the government declared me officially dead. Withdrawal $2,000. Reason estate maintenance. Withdrawal $500,000. Reason legal fees. Withdrawal $150,000. Reason medical expenses. I clicked on the supporting documents for the withdrawals. Each one required the signature of the primary beneficiary. Clara. I pulled up the scanned PDFs. There was Clara's signature at the bottom of the authorized release forms. But it wasn't right. The slant was wrong. The pressure points were too heavy. I knew my wife's handwriting better than my own. I had read thousands of her letters in the jungle by flashlight. This was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery nonetheless. I zoomed in. I could see the digital artifacts. They hadn't even bothered to forge it by hand every time. They had created a digital stamp of her signature and just pasted it onto the documents. They had stolen her identity to steal my life. But where did the money go? $50 million doesn't just vanish. I started tracing the transfers. The money didn't go to estate maintenance. It didn't go to medical bills. It went to shell companies. JS Lifestyle LLC, DT Ventures. I opened the folder for JS Lifestyle. Juliana Sterling. Credit card statements poured onto the screen like a waterfall of greed. Hermes Birkin bag, $25,000. First-class tickets to the Maldives, $18,000. Porsche Cayenne Turbo, $140,000. Weekly payments of $5,000 to an account labeled Marco P. Consulting. I did a quick search on Marco P. He wasn't a consultant. He was a 24-year-old fitness instructor in Miami with an Instagram page full of shirtless photos. I sat back in the chair feeling sick. Juliana was using my blood money to buy handbags and pay a boy toy while my wife scrubbed her floors and ate stale bread. But that wasn't the worst of it. I closed Juliana's folder and opened Damon's email. The inbox was a wall of red flags, subject lines in all caps. Urgent. Final notice. Where is the money? I clicked on an email from a sender named V. Kozlov. The timestamp was from yesterday. Mr. Thorne. Your time is up. The audit of your company revealed that the tech platform is a ghost. You took our investment of $10 million and spent it on gambling debts and covering your wife's lifestyle. We are not a bank. We do not offer extensions. You have 7 days to return the principal plus interest. Total due $12 million. If the funds are not wired by next Friday, we will take the collateral. The house. And Mr. Thorne, do not make us come down there again. The next time we visit, we won't be just breaking furniture. I felt a chill run down my spine. Kozlov. I knew that name. The Russian syndicate operating out of Brighton Beach. Ruthless. Violent. They didn't sue you when you didn't pay. They made you disappear. Damon had borrowed money from the mob to cover the hole he dug after spending all of my money, and he had put the house up as collateral. My house. Clara's sanctuary. But wait, if they lost the house, where was Clara going to go? I searched the inbox for the word Clara. One email popped up. Sent 3 days ago from Juliana to Damon. Subject solution for the mother problem. My hand shook as I clicked it open. Damon. We have to face reality. Once we sell the house to pay Kozlov, we are going to be downsizing to a condo in the city. There is no room for your mother. And frankly, I am done pretending to care. She is a liability. I found a place. It is called Sunnyvale State Facility in New Jersey. It is a state-funded asylum for the indigent and mentally unstable. It is free, so it won't cost us a dime. I already filled out the paperwork claiming she is aggressive and senile. They have a bed opening up next Tuesday. We can drop her off on our way to the airport. Tell her we are taking her to a spa. By the time she realizes where she is, we will be in the wind. Attached to the email was a brochure for Sunnyvale. I opened it. It looked like a prison. Gray walls, barred windows. Reviews online mentioned bedbugs, patient abuse, and heavy sedation. They were going to throw her away. Next Tuesday. That was in 4 days. They were going to sell my home to the Russian mob and dump my wife in a hellhole to rot while they ran away with whatever scraps of cash they could scrape together. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. For the last 2 days, I had been playing games. I had been pranking them with temperature controls and itching powder. I had been trying to teach them a lesson. But you don't teach a lesson to a cancer. You cut it out. The time for games was over. This was no longer a domestic dispute. This was a rescue mission. I pulled the USB drive from the computer. I had everything I needed. The bank records, the forgeries, the mob connection, the email about the asylum. This was enough to send them to prison for 20 years. But prison was too safe for them. In prison, they would be fed. In prison, they would have a bed. No. I wanted them to feel what Clara felt. I wanted them homeless, I wanted them terrified. I wanted them to have absolutely nothing. I stood up. I wiped my fingerprints from the keyboard. I smoothed out the leather chair. I walked to the window and looked out. The ambulance was pulling away. Damon was sitting on the grass, head in his hands. He looked defeated. He had no idea. He thought his bad night was over. He thought the itching powder and the failed party were the worst things that could happen to him. He didn't know that the man he called a beggar was holding the detonator to his entire life. I looked at the phone on the desk. I picked it up and dialed a number. Not the police. Not yet. I dialed the number for the Black Ops extraction team leader, my old second in command. "We are green lit," I said, my voice low and steady. "The target is confirmed hostile. The hostage is in immediate danger. We are moving the timeline up." "Copy that, Spectre," the voice on the other end said. "What are the orders?" I looked at Damon through the glass. "Scorched earth," I said. "I want the Russians to know the house is being sold. I want the bank to know the signatures are fakes, and I want you to find a buyer for the estate, a cash buyer. Who is the buyer, Spectre?" "Me," I said. I hung up the phone. I walked out of the study and locked the door. As I walked down the hallway, the floorboards didn't creak. I was a ghost again. I went back to the shed. Clara was sleeping on her cot, shivering under the thin blanket. I took off my heavy army jacket and laid it over her gently. "Sleep well, my love," I whispered. "Tuesday is coming. But you aren't going to an asylum. You are going to be free. And they are going to find out what happens when you steal from the devil. If you thought the itching powder was brutal, just wait." In the next part, I bring in the heavy artillery. The Russian mob is coming to dinner, and I am the one serving the main course. Hit subscribe because the takedown starts now. I walked out of the main house and into the humid, overgrown silence of the greenhouse at the edge of the estate. The glass panes were dirty, covered in moss, and the exotic orchids I had planted 30 years ago were long dead, replaced by weeds that had choked the life out of everything beautiful. It was a fitting metaphor for my family. But amidst the decay, I found clarity. The study had given me the intel, but now I needed the weapons. And I am not talking about guns. I am talking about the kind of weapons that destroy empires without firing a single shot. I pulled a satellite phone from the false bottom of my duffel bag. It was a bulky, black brick of a device encrypted with a rolling code that the NSA could not crack in 100 years. I extended the antenna and dialed a number that did not exist in any public directory. It rang twice. "Moshi Moshi," a voice answered. It was smooth young and sounded like it was coming from a nightclub in Tokyo. "Kenji," I said, my voice dropping into the flat command tone I hadn't used since the extraction in Beirut. "It is Spectre. We have a code black." The line went dead silent. Then the background music cut out instantly. Spectre Kenji whispered, "The agency said you were dust. I poured a drink for you every anniversary." "I am not dust yet, kid," I said, leaning against a rusted potting table, "but I need a favor. Remember that time in Osaka when the Yakuza had you in a vice and I pulled you out the back window?" "I remember," Kenji said without hesitation. "I owe you my life. Name it." "I need you to build a ghost," I said. "I need a shell company, offshore, impenetrable, registered in the Cayman Islands but looking like it has heavy backing from Dubai oil money. Make it look legit, make it look hungry. And I need it done in an hour." "Done," Kenji said. "What are we buying?" "My house," I said, looking through the dirty glass at the mansion looming in the distance. "And my life." I hung up and dialed the second number. This one went to Zurich. Elias, the banker, the man who could move mountains of gold without leaving a footprint in the snow. Elias answered on the first ring. He never slept. "Silas," he said simply. His voice was like dry ice. "I saw the withdrawal attempts on the Archangel Trust. Amateur forgeries. I blocked the last 3, but they drained the liquid assets before I could engage the kill switch. I am sorry. It is not your fault, Elias," I said. "But now we counterattack. I have 20 million in the emergency reserve, the clean money. I need you to funnel it into the shell company Kenji is building. We are going to buy a house." "You want to save it?" Elias asked. "No," I said, gripping the phone tight. "I want to trap them. Damon is trying to sell the estate to the Russian mob to cover his debts. If he sells to them, the house is gone and Clara ends up in the street. We are going to outbid the Russians. We are going to offer a cash deal that closes in 24 hours. Damon is desperate. He will take the quick cash over the mob threats any day. I understand, Elias said. You want to become his savior so you can become his executioner. Exactly, I said. When he signs that deed, he isn't selling the house to a stranger. He is handing the keys back to me. And once I own the land, I own them. Execute it. I terminated the call. The alliance was active, the hacker and the banker, my boys. They were the only family I had left besides the woman sleeping in the shed. I hid the satellite phone back in my bag and checked my watch. It was time for the next phase. I needed to plant the physical evidence that would make the sale inevitable. I needed to leave a brochure for the shell company right where Damon would find it. I slipped out of the greenhouse and moved back toward the mansion. The lights were still on in the study. Damon was still in there, probably pacing a hole in the carpet. I entered through the kitchen door, which I had left unlocked. The house was quiet. Juliana was upstairs, probably passed out from a cocktail of wine and antihistamines for the itching. I crept down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the marble. I reached the study door. It was cracked open just an inch. I peered inside. Damon was at the desk. He had his head in his hands. But what caught my eye was not his despair. It was the object sitting on the blotter in front of him, a gun. It was a snub-nosed .38 Special, cheap chrome finish, the kind of gun you buy from a guy in a parking lot when you are scared and stupid. It looked out of place next to the expensive laptop and the crystal decanter. I watched him. He picked up the gun. His hand was shaking violently. He spun the cylinder. It wasn't loaded for Russian roulette. It was fully loaded. He wasn't contemplating suicide, he was contemplating defense. He was terrified of Kozlov. I needed to place the brochure on the side table near the door. If I could just slide it in. I pushed the door gently. The hinge, which I hadn't oiled yet, let out a low groan. Damon spun around in his chair so fast he almost fell over. He grabbed the gun and pointed it at the door. "Who is there?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "I have a gun. I will shoot. I swear to God I will shoot." I froze. I was standing in this doorway, half in shadow, half in the light of the hallway. I was Moses. I had to be Moses. I raised my hands, slowly trembling, just the right amount for a terrified old man. "It is just me, Mr. Damon," I stammered, making my voice thin and reedy. "Just Moses. I heard a noise. I thought maybe you needed something." Damon didn't lower the gun. The barrel was wavering, pointing at my chest, then my head, then my chest again. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and rimmed with dark circles. He looked like a man on the edge of a psychotic break. "You were spying on me," he hissed, standing up. "Everyone is spying on me. The Russians, the investors, and now you. What did you see, old man? What did you hear?" "I didn't hear nothing, sir," I said, taking a small step back. "I was just checking the locks. You know, with all the trouble lately, I didn't mean to intrude." "Liar!" he shouted. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. The gun was now 3 feet from my face. I looked at the weapon. The safety was off. His finger was on the trigger. He had no trigger discipline. One sneeze, one muscle spasm, and I would have a bullet in my heart. My combat training screamed at me. Disarm him. It would be so easy. A quick step to the left, a slap to the wrist to redirect the barrel, a strike to the radial nerve, and the gun would be in my hand. I could strip it before he hit the floor, but I couldn't. If I disarmed him, the charade was over. Moses doesn't know Krav Maga. Moses cower. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I let my own son point a loaded gun at my face, and I did nothing. "Please, Mr. Damon," I whimpered, dropping to my knees. "Don't shoot. I am just a gardener. I got nowhere else to go. Don't shoot me, please." Damon stood over me, panting. He looked at me with a mix of disgust and power. For a moment I saw it. The rush. He liked it. He liked holding the power of life and death over someone. He felt weak against the Russians. He felt weak against Juliana, but here with this old black man on his knees, he felt like a god. It was sickening. He kept the gun pointed at my forehead for a long 10 seconds. "Get out," he finally whispered. I didn't move fast enough for him. I said, "Get out," he screamed, and he kicked me. Hard. His dress shoe connected with my ribs. I grunted, falling onto my side. Pain shot through my chest. I felt a rib crack. It wasn't the first time I had broken a bone, but it was the first time my own flesh and blood had done it. I scrambled backward, crab walking on the floor like a frightened animal. I am going, I gasped. Damon watched me retreat, his chest heaving. "Get back to your shed. If I see you in this house again before sunrise, I will put a bullet in your head and tell the police you were a burglar. Do you hear me?" "Yes, sir, I heard you," I said, backing into the hallway. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran, not because I was scared, but because I needed to get out of there before I broke character and snapped his neck. I made it to the kitchen and out the back door. I collapsed against the brick wall of the pantry, breathing hard. I pressed my hand against my ribs, definitely cracked. I closed my eyes and let the pain sharpen my focus. He had pointed a gun at me. He had kicked me when I was down. He had threatened to kill me to cover up his own failures. Any lingering doubt I had, any tiny shred of fatherly instinct that wanted to show him mercy, vanished in that hallway. The boy I raised was dead. The man in that office was a monster. I reached into my pocket. I still had the brochure for the shell company. I hadn't been able to plant it. Plan B. I looked at the window of the study. Damon had sat back down. He was pouring a drink with the hand that held the gun. I didn't need to plant the brochure inside. I knew where he got his mail. I walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. I slipped the glossy pamphlet inside. It was labeled Apex Acquisitions, Instant Cash for Luxury Estates. Tomorrow morning when he went to get the mail, desperate and hungover, this would be the first thing he saw. It would look like a miracle. A lifeline sent from heaven. He wouldn't know it was a hook sent from hell. I walked back to the shed, holding my side. Clara was awake, sitting up on her cot. She saw me wince as I came in. "Mr. Moses?" she asked, concern washing over her face. "What happened? You are hurt." I sat down on the floor next to her. I smiled through the pain. "Just a little tumble, ma'am," I said. "Nothing to worry about." Clara reached out and touched my arm. "You have to be careful," she said. "This place, it is dangerous. The people here, they have lost their way. You have no idea," I thought. I lay down on the hard concrete, staring up at the spider webs in the rafters. My ribs throbbed in time with my heartbeat. "Go ahead, Damon," I thought. "Wave your gun, drink your whiskey, feel big. Because tomorrow you are going to sign your name on a dotted line, and when you do, the gardener is going to own you." I closed my eyes. The alliance was ready. The trap was set. And I had a broken rib to remind me exactly why I was doing this. If you want to see Damon fall for the bait, hook, line, and sinker, hit that subscribe button. The sale is happening in part 8, and you won't believe the look on his face when the money hits his account and then disappears. Let me know in the comments if you would have disarmed him or played the part. I sat in the darkness of the tool shed, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the wooden walls. My ribs were throbbing, a dull rhythmic ache that reminded me of the kick my son had delivered an hour ago. But physical pain was old news to me. I had broken bones in 3 different continents. What kept me awake wasn't the fracture in my chest, but the fracture in my family. Damon had pointed a gun at me. He had looked into the eyes of an old man and threatened to pull the trigger. He had crossed a line that night, a line that separates men from monsters. I looked over at Clara. She was finally sleeping, her breathing shallow and raspy. She was safe for now. But outside the shed, the predator was still prowling. Through the gap in the door, I saw the back porch light flick on. The glass door slid open. Damon stepped out. He was still wearing his suit trousers and a white dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, stained with sweat and spilled whiskey. He was holding the gun. He wasn't putting it away. He was hunting. The paranoia I had planted in his mind was taking root, growing like a poisonous vine. He was checking the perimeter, convinced that the Russians were already here or that the old gardener was plotting something. He stumbled down the stone steps, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the lawn. "Who is out there?" he shouted, his voice slurring slightly. "I know you are watching me. Show yourself." He waved the gun toward the hedges. I knew I should stay in the shed. I knew I should let him shout at the wind until he passed out. But the soldier in me, the father in me, couldn't let it slide. He was handling that weapon with the reckless incompetence of a child. He was going to hurt someone. Maybe himself. Maybe Clara. I stood up. I didn't hunch over this time. I didn't put on the glasses. I pulled my hood up to obscure my face, but I let my posture straighten. I let the years of spinal compression vanish. I rolled my shoulders back. I stepped out of the shed. The movement caught his eye immediately. He spun around, nearly tripping over his own feet. He raised the revolver, pointing it straight at my chest. The distance was 20 feet. At this range, even a drunk coward could get lucky. "Stop!" he screamed. "I see you. Hands where I can see them." I didn't raise my hands. I didn't cower. I didn't beg. I just stood there, a dark silhouette in the mist. I radiated the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you are the most dangerous thing in the garden. Damon's hand was shaking so bad the barrel of the gun was making small circles in the air. I said, "Hands up," he yelled, his voice cracking with fear. "I will shoot. I swear, I will kill you." I took a step forward, slow, deliberate. "Don't come any closer," he shrieked, backing up. I stopped. I looked him dead in the eye, even though he couldn't see mine under the hood. The silence between us was heavy, loaded with 30 years of secrets. I remembered the day I taught him how to shoot. He was 10 years old. We were at the cabin. He was scared of the recoil. He had dropped the BB gun and cried because he thought he had hurt a bird. I had wiped his tears and told him the first rule of carrying a weapon. I spoke. I didn't use the scratchy, high-pitched voice of Moses. I used my voice, the voice that had commanded squads, the voice that had read him bedtime stories. "Never point a weapon unless you intend to pull the trigger, Bambi." The nickname hit him like a physical blow. Bambi. It wasn't a cool nickname, it was what I called him because he was clumsy, always tripping over his own long legs when he was a kid. It was a secret name, a name only his father used, a name buried in a grave 10 years ago. Damon froze. The gun lowered an inch. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He squinted, trying to pierce the darkness, trying to see the face under the hood. "Dad," he whispered. The word was so faint, the wind almost carried it away. He took a step forward, his face twisting in a mix of terror and hope. "Dad, is that you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The seed was planted. He wasn't facing a gardener anymore. He was facing a ghost. I dropped a smoke pellet from my sleeve. It was a simple parlor trick, a small capsule of magnesium and potassium nitrate I had whipped up in the potting shed. It hit the ground and burst with a sharp hiss, releasing a thick cloud of white smoke. Damon flinched, shielding his eyes, coughing. By the time the smoke cleared 3 seconds later, I was gone. I hadn't run. I had simply rolled into the dense hydrangeas to his left, moving with the silence of a viper. I lay flat on the mulch, watching him through the leaves. Damon was spinning in circles, panning the gun wildly. Daddy screamed again. "Dad, come back!" There was no answer. Only the rustle of the wind in the trees. He dropped the gun. He fell to his knees in the wet grass, clawing at his hair. He looked like a man whose reality had just shattered. "I am losing my mind," he sobbed. "I am losing my mind." He stayed there for 5 minutes, crying in the dark. Then he grabbed the gun and ran back toward the house, as if the devil himself was snapping at his heels. I waited until the glass door slammed shut before I moved. I went back to the shed, but I kept my eye on the master bedroom window. The lights were on upstairs. I put in my earpiece. I needed to hear the fallout. Damon burst into the bedroom. I could hear his heavy breathing through the bug I had planted. "Juliana," he gasped. "Juliana, wake up." Juliana was sitting at her vanity, applying a thick layer of cortisol cream to her face. Her skin was still red and blotchy from the itching powder. She looked at him in the mirror, and her expression was one of pure loathing. "What is it now, Damon?" she snapped. "Can't you see I am in agony? My skin feels like it is on fire, and you are running around the yard playing soldier. I saw him," Damon said, his voice trembling. "I saw my father." Juliana stopped rubbing the cream. She turned around slowly. "What did you say?" "My father," Damon repeated. "In the garden. I held a gun on the gardener, but then he spoke. He called me Bambi. Only my dad called me that. Then he vanished. He turned into smoke, Juliana. He is here. His ghost is here. He is haunting us because we are selling the house." Juliana stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cold, cruel sound that scraped against the walls. "You are pathetic," she said. "It is true," Damon pleaded. I heard him. "You are high, Damon." Juliana stood up, walking toward him. She grabbed his face, squeezing his cheeks hard. "Look at your pupils. They are the size of dinner plates. You got into the Xanax again, didn't you? Or maybe you found something stronger in your old stash." "I am not high." Damon pushed her away. "I am telling you." "Stop it," she screamed. "Stop it right now. Your father is dead. He blew up in a car bomb in Serbia 10 years ago. There are no ghosts, Damon. There is only you and your incompetence. You blew the deal tonight. You let the investors walk away because you couldn't control the itching. And now you are hallucinating in the yard." "It wasn't a hallucination," Damon yelled back. He knew the name. Juliana slapped him, harder than she had slapped Clara. "Pull yourself together," she hissed. "We have the Russians breathing down our necks. We have $12 million due in 6 days. I don't have time for your psychotic break. If you can't handle this, go sleep in the guest room. I don't want a junkie in my bed." Damon touched his cheek. He looked at his wife. For the first time I heard something shift in his voice, a tiny crack in his devotion. "You don't believe me," he whispered. "You never believe me. You just want the money." "I want survival," Juliana spat. "And right now you are the biggest threat to my survival. Get out!" Damon backed out of the room. He looked broken. I sat in the shed taking the earpiece out. "Good," I whispered. "Divide and conquer." Juliana thought Damon was crazy. Damon thought he was haunted. They were turning on each other. The trust was gone. The unit was fractured. Tomorrow morning, when Damon found the brochure in the mailbox, he wouldn't show it to Juliana. He wouldn't trust her with the solution. He would try to save himself. He would try to make a deal alone to prove he wasn't crazy, to prove he could fix this. And that would be his undoing. I looked at Clara, sleeping peacefully. "They are fighting ghosts, my love," I said softly. "But the ghost is just a man who loves you." I lay down, but I didn't sleep. My ribs hurt, but the pain was sharp and focusing. The sun would rise in 4 hours, and with the sun would come the offer, the bait. Damon Thorne was about to sell his soul to the devil he thought was dead, and I had the pen ready. If you want to see the moment Damon signs the contract and realizes who is sitting across the table, hit that like button. The trap is sprung in the next part, and trust me, you do not want to miss the look on his face when the ghost takes off the mask. Let me know in the comments if you think Damon deserves a second chance, or if he is too far gone. The morning sun filtered through the cracks of the tool shed, but the warmth did not reach me. I was awake long before dawn, staring at the grainy black and white feed on my portable monitor. My ribs were strapped tight with duct tape, a field medic trick to keep the broken bones from shifting while I moved. The physical pain was sharp but manageable. It was the psychological weight of the last 24 hours that was pressing down on my chest. Damon knew I was here. Or rather, he knew a ghost was here. The seed of paranoia I had planted with the word Bambi was growing, but I needed to keep the pressure on. I looked over at the cot. It was empty. My heart skipped a beat. Clara was gone. I checked the time. 0600 hours. Usually she did not leave the shed until 0700 when Juliana rang the service bell. I toggled through the camera feeds frantically. Kitchen clear, living room clear, garage clear. Then I found her. She was on the second floor landing the main hallway that led to the master suite. She was on her hands and knees crawling on the expensive Persian rug. She was weeping softly. Her hands were patting the floor, searching for something invisible. I turned up the audio gain. "Where is it?" she whispered, her voice trembling with panic. I took it off to wash the dishes. "I put it right here. Silas gave it to me. I cannot lose it. If I lose it, he won't know me when he comes back." She was looking for her wedding ring. I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of nausea. That ring. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a simple gold band with a tiny diamond chip. I had bought it with my first paycheck from the Army back in 1972. I had skipped meals for 3 months to afford it. When I gave it to her under the streetlights of Chicago, she had promised me she would never take it off. And she hadn't. Not for 30 years. But 5 years ago, when the money stopped coming because Damon intercepted it, the ring had disappeared. The dossier said Juliana had sold it to a pawn shop for $300 to buy a bottle of champagne. On the screen, I saw the door to the master bedroom fly open. Juliana stepped out. She looked like a wreck. Her face was still swollen from the itching powder covered in white calamine lotion. She was wearing a silk robe and she looked hungover and mean. "What is this noise?" she screamed, looking down at Clara. "Why are you crawling on the floor, you crazy old bat? It is 6 in the morning. Clara looked up, tears streaming down her face. She didn't see the monster in front of her. She only saw her loss. "My ring," she sobbed, grabbing the hem of Juliana's robe. "Please, Miss Juliana, have you seen my ring? The gold one. Silas gave it to me. I need it. He is coming home and I need to be wearing it." Juliana kicked her leg away, freeing her robe from Clara's grip. "Oh my God, stop it," Juliana groaned, rubbing her temples. "You are obsessed with that trash. How many times do I have to tell you? It is gone. Just like your husband. Just like your mind." "No." Clara shook her head frantically, getting to her feet, unsteady and frail. "It is not gone. I had it. I misplaced it. Help me find it, please. It is all I have left of him." Juliana laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. You didn't misplace it, you senile fool, Juliana spat, getting right in Clara's face. I sold it. Years ago. I took it off your finger while you were sleeping because we needed money to pay for your medication. Or maybe I bought a pair of shoes with it. I don't remember. It was worth nothing. Just a piece of cheap gold. Clara stood frozen. The words hit her like physical blows. You sold it, Clara whispered. Her voice broke. That was my heart. You sold my heart. She reached out. For the first time in years, I saw a spark of the old Clara. The fighter. She grabbed Juliana's shoulders. Give it back, she screamed. You give it back to me, you thief, you wicked girl. Juliana's eyes went wide. She wasn't used to resistance. She was used to submission. The audacity of this old woman touching her threw her into a blind rage. Get your hands off me! Juliana shrieked. She raised her hand, and she didn't just slap Clara. She shoved her, hard, with both hands. It happened in slow motion on my monitor. Clara was standing at the top of the stairs. The shove caught her off balance. Her feet tangled in the long hem of her oversized maid uniform. No, I screamed in the empty shed, reaching out to the screen as if I could catch her. Clara fell backward. She tumbled down the first 3 steps, hitting her shoulder against the banister. Then she rolled, her body limp and fragile, bouncing against the hardwood stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4. She landed at the bottom of the landing in a heap. She didn't move. Silence filled the house. Juliana stood at the top of the stairs, her hands still raised, panting. She looked down at the motionless body of my wife. She didn't look horrified. She looked annoyed. Great, she muttered. Now I have to deal with this. I sat in the shed and the world turned gray. I didn't feel anger. Anger is a hot emotion. Anger is what makes you shout and throw punches. What I felt was something far worse. It was the cold absolute zero of a sniper taking a breath before the kill shot. It was the feeling of a judge passing a death sentence. I checked the vitals monitor I had secretly slipped into Clara's pocket days ago. Her heart rate was elevated but steady. She was unconscious, but alive. I stood up. I walked to the wall of the shed and punched it. I punched it until my knuckles split and the wood cracked. That was the last free pass, Juliana. I had been playing games. I had been trying to scare them into leaving. I had been trying to be clever. But you don't play games with terrorists. You eliminate them. I grabbed my burner phone. I sat back down in front of the monitor. Juliana was walking down the stairs slowly. She poked Clara with her toe. When Clara groaned, Juliana rolled her eyes and walked into the kitchen to get coffee, leaving my injured wife on the floor. Okay, I whispered, my voice sounding like gravel. You want to talk about money. You want to talk about selling things that don't belong to you. I opened the encrypted email app. I had hacked Juliana's personal cloud account 3 days ago. I had found something interesting, something she had kept hidden from Damon. While Damon was drowning in debt, begging the Russians for time, Juliana had been building a nest egg. She had been siphoning cash from the company and buying loose diamonds, uncut, untraceable diamonds, and she kept them in a floor safe hidden under the vanity in her dressing room. The combination was her birthday. I started typing, recipient V. Kozlov. Subject, the missing collateral. Mr. Kozlov, I am a concerned party who knows you are having trouble collecting the $12 million owed by Damon Thorne. You are threatening to take the house, but litigation takes time and the market is slow. I thought you should know that there is a faster way to recoup your investment. Damon's wife, Juliana Sterling, is currently in possession of $2 million worth of uncut diamonds. She purchased them with the funds her husband borrowed from you. They are located in a fireproof safe beneath the floorboards of the master bathroom vanity. The code is 0812. She is planning to flee the country with them on Tuesday, leaving you with nothing but a bankrupt husband and a foreclosure. Consider this a tip from a friend. Regards, the gardener. I hit send. The message flew through the digital ether, bouncing off satellites in Singapore and landing on a server in Brighton Beach. I knew Kozlov. I knew how he operated. He didn't like being stolen from, but he hated being made a fool of even more. The idea that Damon's wife was sitting on a pile of diamonds while pleading poverty would act like gasoline on a fire. I looked back at the monitor. Clara was starting to sit up, clutching her arm. She looked confused and in pain. I wanted to run in there. I wanted to carry her out. But not yet. If I went in now, I would just be an old man fighting a younger woman. I needed the wolves to clear the path for me. Kozlov would get the email within minutes. His men were likely already in the area watching the house. They would come, and they wouldn't knock. I watched Juliana sipping her coffee in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, probably looking for flights to Paris. "Enjoy it, Juliana," I whispered. "Enjoy that coffee. Because in about 20 minutes, the only thing you are going to be tasting is fear." I stood up and grabbed my medical kit from the duffel bag. I needed to be ready to move as soon as the Russians breached the door. My mission parameters had changed. This was no longer a covert op. This was an extraction. I put on my black tactical gloves. The leather creaked as I made a fist. "You pushed her down the stairs, Juliana. I am going to push you into hell. If you want to see what happens when the Russian mob realizes they have been played, hit that subscribe button. The door is about to come down in part 10, and you won't believe how fast Juliana turns on her husband when the gun is pointed at her." Leave a comment below if you think I should have sent the email or if I should have handled it myself. The email I sent to the Russian syndicate was like throwing a raw steak into a kennel of starving pit bulls. I knew they would come. Kozlov did not become the kingpin of Brighton Beach by letting people steal from him, and I had just handed him the proof that Juliana was sitting on his money. I sat in the darkness of the shed, polishing the handle of my long-handled hoe. It was solid hickory, aged and hardened. In the hands of a farmer, it was a tool for tilling soil. In the hands of a retired Black Ops commander, it was a staff capable of generating 2,000 pounds of force per square inch. I checked the time. Midnight. Right on schedule. High beams swept across the front lawn, cutting through the fog. 3 black SUVs tore up the driveway, not bothering to avoid the flower beds. They skidded to a halt on the gravel. Doors flew open. I counted 6 men. Heavy coats, no masks. They weren't here to rob the place. They were here to send a message. I stood up, adjusting my gloves. I heard the crash of the front door being kicked in. It sounded like a gunshot echoing through the night. Then came the screams. I moved. I didn't run. Running attracts attention. I moved with the fluid, predatory grace I had learned in the jungles of Cambodia. I merged with the shadows, slipping through the side door of the kitchen just as the chaos erupted in the living room. I stood in the hallway, peering around the corner. The scene was straight out of a nightmare, but for Damon and Juliana, it was their reality crashing down. 2 of the Russians had Damon pinned to the coffee table. One was holding his head down by the hair, while the other held his right hand splayed out on the mahogany surface. A third man, the leader, was standing over Juliana. He was a giant with a scar running down his cheek, holding a pair of heavy garden shears he had grabbed from the patio. "Where are the diamonds?" The leader roared, his voice thick with a Russian accent. The email said, "You have diamonds in the floor. Open the safe." Juliana was hyperventilating, clutching her silk robe. "I don't know what you are talking about," she shrieked, lying until the bitter end. "There are no diamonds. My husband is broke. Ask him." The leader didn't ask. He nodded to the man holding Damon. The thug pulled out a cigar cutter. He positioned it over Damon's pinky finger. "No," Damon screamed, kicking his legs wildly. "No, please. Juliana, give it to them. Give them the stones. I saw the receipt. I know you have them." Juliana froze. Her eyes darted from Damon to the Russians. Even with her husband's finger in a guillotine, she was calculating. She was wondering if she could still keep the gems if she let them take a finger. The greed was etched into her soul. "You lying witch," Damon sobbed. "They are going to cut me." "Cut him," the leader said calmly. The thug squeezed the cutter. Damon howled a sound of pure primal terror. That was my cue. I couldn't let them maim him. He was a coward and a traitor, but he was still my son. And more importantly, he was my prey. No one hurts my target but me. I stepped out of the shadows, dragging the hickory hoe behind me. The metal tip scraped against the marble floor, making a low screeching sound that cut through the screams. "Gentlemen," I said. My voice wasn't the trembling whisper of Moses. It was deep, resonant, and cold as the grave. "You are tracking mud on my freshly mopped floor." The room went silent. The 6 Russians turned to look. They saw an old black man in dirty work clothes leaning on a garden tool. They laughed. It was a guttural, dismissive sound. "Get lost, Grandpa," the leader sneered, "or we will bury you in the yard." He signaled to the 2 men closest to me. "Take out the trash." The 2 thugs approached. They were young, strong, and confident. They saw a frail old man. They didn't see the stance. They didn't see that my center of gravity had lowered. They didn't see that my grip on the hickory staff had shifted to a combat hold. The first attacker threw a lazy right hook. I didn't block it. I stepped inside the arc. I drove the butt end of the hickory staff into his solar plexus. The sound of the air leaving his lungs was like a deflating tire. As he bent over gasping, I brought the handle up, striking him under the chin. His head snapped back and he collapsed unconscious before he hit the rug. 1 second. The second attacker hesitated, his eyes going wide. He reached for his waistband, probably for a gun. Too slow. I spun the hoe, swinging the heavy metal head in a low arc. It connected with his kneecap. The sound of the patella shattering was loud and wet. He screamed and went down. As he fell, I rotated the staff and drove the handle into the nerve cluster on his neck. He went silent instantly. 3 seconds. The room was frozen. Damon was staring at me, his mouth open. Juliana looked like she was seeing a ghost. The leader looked at his 2 fallen men, then at me. His amusement was gone. He pulled a handgun from his coat. I didn't give him time to aim. I kicked the heavy oak coffee table, sliding it across the floor. It slammed into the shins of the men holding Damon, knocking them off balance. I closed the distance to the leader. He fired 1 shot. Wild. It shattered a vase behind me. I used the momentum of my run to launch into a slide, tackling him at the waist. We hit the floor. He was big, but size doesn't matter when you know anatomy. I trapped his gun hand, twisting the wrist until the weapon clattered away. I rolled, getting on top of him. I pressed the end of the hickory staff against his windpipe. Not enough to crush it, but enough to let him know that breathing was now a privilege I was granting him. The other 3 men scrambled to their feet, pulling knives and guns. "Stop," I commanded. My voice cracked like a whip. I looked down at the leader. His face was turning purple. "Tell your men to stand down, Sergei," I whispered, leaning close to his ear, "or I will crush your larynx and you will drown in your own blood." "How do you know my name?" he gasped. "I know more than your name," I said, keeping my voice low so only he could hear. "I know about the shipment in Belgrade in '99. I know about the debt Kozlov owes to a ghost named Spectre." The leader's eyes bulged. The fear I saw there was absolute. Spectre was a legend in the underworld, a boogeyman who had dismantled entire networks in Eastern Europe. "Spectre," he choked out, "you are dead." "I am retired," I corrected, "and this debt is mine now." I eased the pressure on his throat. "Get up. Take your men. Tell Kozlov the account is settled. If he comes back here, if I see one of your SUVs within 10 miles of this house, I will pay him a visit, and I won't be using a gardening tool." The leader scrambled backward, gasping for air. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. He signaled his men frantically. "Let's go," he shouted. "Move, now!" They grabbed their unconscious comrades, dragging them out the door. They didn't look back. They ran like the devil himself was chasing them. I stood there alone in the center of the ruined living room. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I turned slowly to face Damon and Juliana. They were huddled together on the sofa. Damon was clutching his hand even though it hadn't been cut. Juliana was staring at me, her face pale as a sheet. They didn't see Moses anymore. The glasses had fallen off during the fight. My posture was straight. My eyes were cold. "Who are you?" Damon whispered. His voice was trembling uncontrollably. You took them out. You are not a gardener. Who are you?" I walked over to the coffee table and picked up my glasses. I put them back on. I hunched my shoulders. I let the mask slide back into place, but I left a crack in it, a warning. "I am just the help, sir," I said, my voice returning to the scratchy rasp of the old man. "Just cleaning up the weeds." I looked at Juliana. Her eyes were fixed on the floorboards where the safe was hidden. She knew that I knew. "You folks should lock the door," I said, turning to leave. "It is a dangerous world out there. You never know who is listening." I walked out into the night, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their own making. I went back to the shed and sat on the cot. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had saved them. Not because I loved them, but because I needed them. I needed Damon to be alive to sign the papers tomorrow. But something had changed. I saw it in their eyes. They were terrified of the Russians, yes. But they were more terrified of me. They didn't know who I was, but they knew I was dangerous. Good. Fear is a motivator. I lay back on the cot and closed my eyes. "Tomorrow is the sale," I whispered to the empty room. "Tomorrow I buy my life back." But as I drifted off, I couldn't get the image of Damon's terrified face out of my mind. He looked so much like he did when he was a boy afraid of the dark. The difference is, I thought grimly this time, I am the darkness. If you thought the fight was intense, wait until you see the contract signing. The legal battle in Part 11 is going to be bloodier than any fistfight. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the twist coming up will leave you speechless. And let me know in the comments, would you have saved them or let the mob take the diamonds? The sun rose over the Hamptons, but it did not bring warmth. It only brought a harsh, revealing light to the wreckage of the night before. The living room looked like a war zone. The coffee table was splintered. The Persian rug was stained with the blood of the Russian thug I had incapacitated, and the smell of fear still hung heavy in the air. Damon and Juliana were sitting at the kitchen island staring into their coffee mugs like two people waiting for the executioner to pull the lever. I was there too in the background, hunched over a broom, sweeping up the shards of the Ming vase that had been shattered during the fight. To them, I was just Moses, the old gardener, cleaning up the mess. They didn't know that I was the one who had orchestrated the chaos, and I was the one who was about to offer them the only lifeline they would ever see. Damon's phone rang. The sound made both of them jump. Damon stared at the screen. It was an unknown number. He looked at Juliana, his eyes wide with panic. "It is Kozlov," he whispered. "He is calling to tell us we are dead." "Answer it," Juliana hissed, clutching her silk robe tight around her throat. "If you don't answer, they will just come back." Damon picked up the phone, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He put it on speaker. "Hello," he squeaked. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne." The voice on the other end was smooth, polished, and carried a faint, unrecognizable accent. It wasn't Russian. It was the voice of money. It was Elias, my banker in Zurich, using a voice modulator. "Who is this?" Damon asked. "My name is Mr. Alfide, representing the Apex Acquisition Group based in Dubai. I apologize for the early call, but my clients operate on a different time zone. We understand that your company, Thorn Tech, and your estate are currently, let us say, under financial pressure." Damon and Juliana exchanged a look. How did they know? "We are fine." Damon lied badly. "Please, Mr. Thorne." The voice cut in silky and sharp. "We know about the liquidity issues. We know about the loans. And we know about the short timeline you are facing. My client is a very private individual who has long admired the architecture of your estate and the potential of your tech patent. He is a collector of distressed assets." "Distressed?" Juliana bristled even in her fear. "This is a prime property, and we are prepared to offer a prime price." The voice continued. $30 million, cash, for the house, the land, and the full controlling interest in Thorn Tech. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. I stopped sweeping. I stopped. I watched them. 30 million. It was an insane number. The house was worth 15. The company was worth 0. 30 million was a golden parachute falling from the sky. It was enough to pay off the Russians, enough to buy a penthouse in Manhattan, enough to keep Juliana in Birkin bags for another decade. 30 million, Damon choked out. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," the voice said. "But there are conditions. My client moves fast. He wants the deal closed today. Contracts signed by noon. Funds transferred by 1 p.m. He is flying out of the country tonight, and he wants the keys in his hand before he leaves." "We can do that," Juliana shouted, leaning over the phone. "We can absolutely do that." "There is one more thing," the voice added. "A matter of corporate ethics. My client is a traditionalist. He believes that when you acquire an estate, you acquire its legacy. We understand there is an elderly dependent living on the property. A Mrs. Clara Thorne." Damon froze. "Yeah, my mother." "The contract stipulates that the guardianship of Mrs. Clara Thorne will be transferred to the new ownership trust. My client wishes to turn the estate into a private sanctuary, and he believes it is bad luck to displace the matriarch. She will remain in the home under the care of the new owner. You will sign over all legal rights and responsibilities for her welfare. In exchange, you walk away with $30 million free and clear. No debts, no obligations." I watched Juliana's face. I expected hesitation. I expected her to ask who the stranger was who wanted to keep her mother-in-law. I expected some shred of human curiosity. But all I saw was relief. She didn't care. To her, Clara was just another piece of furniture, another line item on the expense report. If this rich eccentric from Dubai wanted to keep the old lady, it just meant she didn't have to pay for the nursing home. "Done," Juliana said instantly. "You can have her. She comes with the house." Damon looked at his wife. Juliana, we can't just sell Mom. Oh, grow up, Damon, she snapped, covering the microphone. Do you want your fingers cut off by the Russians? Do you want to go to jail? This guy is offering us a way out. He probably wants a tax write-off for running a charity case. Who cares? We take the money and we run. Damon looked at the phone, then at the floor. He was weak. He had always been weak. Okay, he whispered. Send the contract. Excellent, the voice said. My legal team is on their way. They will meet you in your dining room at 11 a.m. Be ready. The line clicked dead. Juliana screamed. It was a scream of victory. She grabbed Damon and kissed him, leaving a smear of white calamine lotion on his face. We are rich, she shrieked. We are saved. $30 million, Damon. We can pay Kozlov and still have 18 million left. We are going to Paris. We are going to buy a villa. She spun around and saw me standing there with the broom. What are you looking at, old man? She sneered. I lowered my head, adjusting my glasses. Just happy for you, ma'am. Sounds like a blessing. You bet it is a blessing. She laughed. And you know what else it is? It is your eviction notice. As soon as we sign those papers, you are out of here, Moses. The new owner can deal with you. Pack your trash. I nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. I will be ready to go. I walked out of the kitchen carrying the dustpan full of broken glass. I walked straight to the shed. Clara was sitting on the edge of her cot holding her arm where she had fallen yesterday. She looked pale. Mr. Moses, she asked. Why are they screaming? Is it the bad men again? No. Miss Clara, I said, sitting down next to her. It is good news. They are selling the house. Clara's eyes filled with tears. But what about Silas? If they sell the house, how will he find me? He told me to wait here. I took her hand. Her skin was paper thin and cold. He found you, Clara, I said, my voice dropping the raspy disguise. He found you. The man buying the house. He knows Silas. He is a friend. Clara looked at me. For a moment the fog lifted. She squeezed my hand. A friend, she whispered. Yes, I said. And today, everything changes. You just have to be brave for a few more hours. Can you do that for me? She nodded, wiping her eyes. I can be brave. I am a soldier's wife. I stood up. I had work to do. I went to the back of the shed where I kept my garment bag. I unzipped it. Inside was not the ragged clothes of Moses the gardener. Inside was a charcoal gray bespoke suit cut to fit a man who carries himself with authority, a white shirt starched stiff, a silk tie, and my old signet ring, the one with the Black Ops crest. I couldn't wear it yet. I had to wait until the ink was dry. I spent the next 2 hours monitoring the house. A limousine pulled up at 10:45 a.m. 2 men in expensive suits got out carrying briefcases. They were not from Dubai. They were from a law firm in Manhattan that owed Elias a favor. Actors with law degrees. They walked into the house. I moved to the window of the dining room, peering through the gap in the heavy velvet curtains. Damon and Juliana were sitting at the table. They had tried to clean themselves up, but they still looked ragged. Juliana was wearing oversized sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. Damon was drinking whiskey straight from the glass. The lawyers laid the documents out. It was a stack of paper 3 inches thick. This is the deed transfer, one lawyer said. This is the liability release. And this, he tapped a thick document bound in blue. This is the transfer of guardianship for Clara Thorne. By signing this, you relinquish all rights to contact, visit, or make decisions for her. She becomes the sole ward of the Apex Trust. Juliana grabbed the pen. She didn't even read it. She signed her name with a flourish. Damon hesitated. He looked at the document. He looked at the empty chair where his mother should have been sitting. Is she going to be okay? He asked. The lawyer smiled a shark-like smile. She will be treated exactly as she deserves, Mr. Thorne. That answer was ambiguous enough to satisfy Damon's conscience. He signed. I watched the pen move across the paper. That ink was binding. That ink was the seal on their coffin. Congratulations, the lawyer said, closing the folder. The funds have been released. You should see them in your account in 3, 2, 1. Damon checked his phone. His eyes bulged. It is there, he gasped. 30 million. It is actually there. He jumped up, hugging Juliana. They laughed. They cried. They thought they had won the lottery. but they didn't know how a wire transfer works when it is controlled by a ghost banker. Elias had shown them a dummy interface. The money was there visually, but it was frozen. It would sit there just long enough for them to feel safe, and then it would vanish clawed back by the very clauses they hadn't bothered to read. "We need to pack," Juliana said, grabbing her purse. "We need to get to the airport before the Russians realize we have money." "Wait," the lawyer said. "There is one final condition. The buyer is here. He wants to inspect the property immediately to ensure it meets the standards of the contract." "Here," Damon asked, looking around. "Where?" "He is in the garden," the lawyer said, pointing to the French doors. Damon and Juliana turned. I was standing there. I had shed the gardening clothes. I was wearing the charcoal suit. My back was straight. I had removed the thick glasses. I had wiped the dirt from my face. I opened the glass doors and stepped into the dining room. Damon squinted at me. He looked confused. He saw the suit. He saw the posture, but his brain couldn't process it. "Who are you?" he asked. "Where is the buyer?" I walked to the head of the table. I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen. I picked up the document transferring Clara's guardianship. I folded it and put it in my inside pocket. "I am the buyer," I said. My voice filled the room, commanding and deep. Juliana laughed nervously. "What is this? Is this a joke?" "You are the gardener. You are Moses." "No, Juliana," I said, turning my cold gaze on her. "Moses was a disguise. Just like your marriage. Just like your wealth." Damon stood up, backing away. He looked at my face. Really looked at it. He saw the scar on my chin. He saw the way I stood. He heard the voice. "Bambi," he whispered. "No," Juliana screamed. "No. He is dead. He is dead." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the one thing that would end the debate. I pulled out my old military ID dog tags clinking against the metal. I threw them on the table. "Captain Silas Thorne," I said. "1st Special Forces Operational Detachment." I looked at my son. "Hello, Damon. Did you miss me?" The room spun. Damon grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. Juliana looked like she was going to vomit. You bought the house?" Damon stammered. "I bought my life back," I corrected, "and now it is time for you to get out of it." "But the 30 million, Juliana cried. "We signed the papers. The money is ours." "Is it?" I asked. "Check your phone again." Damon looked at his screen. The balance was flashing red. Transaction reversed. Fraudulent activity detected. "What did you do?" Juliana screamed, lunging at me. "What did you do to my money?" "It was never your money," I said, catching her wrist without even looking at it. "It was my money. The money you stole from the Archangel Trust. I just took it back, plus interest." I released her and she stumbled back into the sideboard. "Get out," I said. "Not get out of my house. Not get out of town. Get out of my sight before I forget that I am a father and remember that I am a soldier." Damon fell to his knees. It wasn't a performance this time. He was broken. "Dad," he sobbed. "Please. The Russians. They will kill us." I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just the hollow exhaustion of a job done. "You should have thought of that before you sold your mother for a pair of shoes," I said. I turned my back on them. "Mr. Sterling, show these trespassers the door." I walked toward the kitchen. I had a date. Clara was waiting in the shed, and I had a promise to keep. If you want to see the emotional reunion that made even the cameraman cry, hit that like button. The war is over, but the healing begins in the final chapter. Don't go anywhere. The atmosphere in the dining room was so tense it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, shutting out the bright morning sun, creating a gloom that smelled of old wax and fresh fear. I stood in the corner, my hands folded over the handle of my broom head, bowed, my posture slumped in the familiar shape of Moses the gardener. But under the brim of my dirty cap, my eyes were sharp, scanning every micro-expression, every twitch of a muscle. I was not cleaning. I was witnessing. 2 men in charcoal gray suits sat at the head of the long mahogany table. They were not real lawyers. They were operatives from my old network, men who could dismantle a government with a briefcase as easily as a gun. But to Damon and Juliana, they looked like salvation. They looked like $30 million wrapped in silk ties. The taller one slid a document across the polished wood. The sound of the paper sliding was a hiss, like a snake moving through dry grass. "This is the final transfer agreement," Mr. Thorne, the operative, said, his voice devoid of emotion. It assigns total ownership of the estate, the land, and the intellectual property of Thorn Tech to the Apex Group. It also includes the clause regarding the guardianship of Mrs. Clara Thorne. Once you sign this, you have no legal claim to this property or the people residing in it. Damon sat there, staring at the paper. His hand was shaking so badly the ice in his whiskey glass chattered. He looked like a man on the gallows. He looked at the pen as if it were a knife. I don't know, he stammered. It feels wrong. Mom, she has lived here for 30 years. To just hand her over to a stranger. Juliana reached over and snatched the pen from the table. Her fingernails were painted a blood red that matched the scratches on her neck from the itching powder. Don't be an idiot, Damon, she hissed. We are not handing her over to a stranger. We are handing her over to a professional care team. We are doing her a favor. Do you want to go to prison? Do you want the Russians to come back and finish what they started with your fingers? Sign the damn paper. She shoved the pen into his hand. Damon took a deep breath. He looked at Juliana. He looked at the door where the Russians had broken in the night before. Fear won. It always wins with cowards. He lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered over the signature line. I tightened my grip on the broom. This was it. The moment of betrayal. But then the double doors to the hallway creaked open. We all turned. Clara was standing there. She wasn't wearing the maid uniform. I had burned that rag in the incinerator 2 nights ago. She was wearing one of her old floral dresses that I had dug out of storage. It was wrinkled and a bit loose, but she wore it with a dignity that filled the room. But it wasn't the dress that stopped my heart. It was her eyes. For the last 5 years, Juliana had been feeding Clara a cocktail of heavy sedatives and generic antipsychotics, telling her they were vitamins. It kept her docile, confused, and foggy. It made her easy to control. But for the last 7 days since I infiltrated the house, I had been swapping those pills. Every morning when I brought in the fresh milk, I switched her medication with high-grade cognitive enhancers and nutrient supplements I had Elias ship in from a clinic in Zurich. The fog was lifting. The chemicals were leaving her system. And right now, in this critical moment, the woman standing in the doorway wasn't the confused old lady who scrubbed floors. She was Clara Thorne, the matriarch. Mom, Damon said, half standing up, "Go back to bed. We are busy." Clara didn't move. She walked into the room. Her steps were slow but steady. She didn't look at Damon. She looked straight at the stack of papers on the table. "What are you signing?" she asked. Her voice was clear. The raspy tremor was gone. It was the voice of a woman who had raised a family in the south side of Chicago before we had money. It was strong. We are just refinancing the house," Mom Juliana lied, quickly flashing a fake smile. "Just some boring paperwork. Go back to the kitchen and make us some tea. Moses, take her away." Juliana snapped her fingers at me. I didn't move. Clara walked past me. She didn't look at me, but I could feel her energy. She walked right up to the table and placed her hand on the documents. Her hand was calloused from scrubbing Juliana's floors, but it was steady. "Refinancing," she repeated. She picked up the top page and read it. "Sale of property. Transfer of guardianship." She dropped the paper. She looked at Damon. The look of betrayal on her face was more painful than any physical wound I had ever suffered. "You are selling the house," she whispered. "You are selling Silas's house. And you are selling me. Like I am a piece of furniture." Damon looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "Mom, please. We have to. The debt. Dad left us in debt," liar, Clara shouted. The word rang through the room like a gunshot. Damon flinched. Juliana stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Don't you raise your voice at us, you ungrateful old witch," Juliana yelled. "We have taken care of you for years. We put a roof over your head while you wandered around talking to ghosts." Clara turned to Juliana, and in that moment, the hierarchy of the house shifted. The predator became the prey. "I was not talking to ghosts," Clara said, pointing a finger at Juliana's chest. "I was talking to my heart, and my heart told me something was wrong, but I was too drugged to see it. But I see it now." Clara reached out and grabbed Juliana's wrist. "Where is the money?" Clara demanded. "The money Silas sent. The Archangel money. I remember now. I signed the papers years ago. Millions of dollars. Where is it?" Juliana tried to pull away, but Clara held on. "You spent it," Clara hissed. "You spent it on clothes, on parties, on that car outside. You are a thief. You are a common thief, Juliana. You stole from a widow and you stole from a son who was too stupid to stop you. That was the breaking point. Juliana's face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. The $30 million was slipping away. The lies were crumbling. She couldn't handle the truth coming from the woman she had treated like a slave. "Shut up," Juliana shrieked. "Shut your mouth." She raised her other hand. It was a fist this time. She wasn't going to slap. She was going to punch. She was going to beat my wife into silence right there in front of the lawyers. Damon just sat there paralyzed. I saw the muscles in Juliana's shoulder bunch. I saw the intent. She was going to hurt Clara. She was going to hurt my queen. The time for Moses was over. I moved. It wasn't the shuffle of an old man. It was the blur of a kinetic strike. I covered the 10 feet between the corner and the table in a fraction of a second. Just as Juliana's fist came down, I stepped in between them. I caught her wrist in midair. The sound of my hand clamping onto hers was loud, a sharp slap of skin on skin. I didn't just hold it, I applied pressure, the kind of pressure that grinds bone against bone. Juliana gasped, her eyes going wide with shock. She looked at her hand stopped in midair, then she looked up at me. She saw the dirty hat, she saw the thick glasses. But then she looked closer. She saw the set of my jaw. She saw the veins standing out on my neck. She saw that I wasn't shaking. I wasn't hunching. I was standing like a stone wall. "Let go of me," she screamed, trying to yank her hand back. "You dirty old man, let go or I will have you killed." I didn't let go. I squeezed harder. She whimpered, dropping to her knees under the pressure. I looked down at her. I let the silence stretch out, letting the fear fill the room. Enough. I said the word softly, but it carried the weight of a command that had silenced battlefields. It wasn't the high-pitched wheeze of the gardener. It was my voice, deep, resonant, unmistakable. Damon's head snapped up. He stared at my back. "That voice," he whispered. I looked at the lawyers. They were sitting perfectly still, watching. They knew the signal. I looked at Clara. She was standing behind me, breathing hard. She looked at my back. She reached out and touched the fabric of my dirty work jacket. "Silas," she whispered. I didn't turn to her yet. I kept my eyes on Juliana, who was now kneeling on the floor, tears of pain streaming down her face. "You called her a thief," I said to Juliana, tightening my grip one last time before releasing her with a shove that sent her sprawling onto the rug. "You are right. She is a thief, but you are wrong about what she stole." I reached up and slowly pulled the dirty baseball cap off my head. I dropped it on the table. Then I reached up and took off the thick glasses. I folded them and placed them next to the cap. I stood up to my full height, rolling my shoulders back, shedding the weight of the old gardener, shedding the years of deception. "She didn't steal your money, Juliana," I said, turning to face the room. "She stole the wrong family." I turned around slowly to face my son. "Hello, Damon." The look on his face was worth every second of the last 30 years. He looked like he was seeing the dead rise. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Dad," he choked out, You are dead." We buried an empty coffin. I walked over to the table and picked up the contract. I ripped it in half. The sound of the paper tearing was the only sound in the world. "I am very much alive, son," I said, tossing the pieces of paper onto his lap. "And I am very disappointed. If you want to see the moment the mask comes off completely and the reckoning begins, you have to watch part 13. The game is over. The judgment is here. Hit subscribe because the next 5 minutes are going to change everything for this family." The sound of the paper tearing was still echoing in the room when Damon finally found his voice. It wasn't the voice of a man. It was the screech of a spoiled child who had just been told playtime was over. He jumped up from his chair, knocking it backward onto the parquet floor. His face was flushed with a mixture of whiskey and rage. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his eyes bulging. "You are insane," he screamed. "You are just a gardener. A dirty, senile gardener who smells like manure. You think you can buy this house. You think you can tear up legal documents. I am going to have you arrested. I am going to have you thrown in a cell so deep you will never see the sun again." He turned to the 2 men in suits, the operatives posing as lawyers. "Call the police," he shouted. "Do you see this? This employee is assaulting us. He is destroying property. Get him out of here." The lawyers didn't move. They sat perfectly still, their hands folded on the table, watching the scene with the detached interest of scientists observing lab rats. Damon looked confused. "Why aren't you doing anything?" he yelled. I took a step forward. The floorboards didn't creak. "Sit down, Damon," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it hit him like a physical blow. He froze. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I slowly wiped the smudge of grease paint from my cheek. I took the thick glasses off my nose and folded them, putting them into my breast pocket. I rolled my neck, hearing the vertebrae crack as I released the tension I had been holding for a week. I stood up straight. I grew 3 inches in height. The hunch of Moses vanished, replaced by the iron rod posture of a man who had led men into hell and walked back out. Damon stumbled back, his legs hitting the edge of the table. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I walked over to the sideboard where the crystal decanter sat. I poured a glass of water and drank it, washing away the scratchy rasp I had forced into my throat. I turned back to them. I looked at Juliana, who was still on the floor clutching her wrist. I looked at Damon, who was shaking like a leaf, and I looked at Clara, who was watching me with tears of recognition streaming down her face. "I told you," I said, my voice deep and clear, filling the cavernous room. "I am the buyer. I am the one who wired $30 million into your account, and I am the one who froze it 5 seconds later. I am also the one who bought your debt from the Russians last night so they wouldn't cut your fingers off." I took a step closer to Damon. And most importantly, Damon, I am the man who taught you how to ride a bike. I am the man who paid for that suit you are wearing. I am your father. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the dust settling. Damon's face went white, then gray. He looked like he was going to pass out. "No," he gasped. "No. That is impossible. Dad is dead. We buried you. We had a funeral. There was a casket. Empty," I said. "It was a closed casket, Damon. A cover story. I was on a black site operation in Syria. I sent word. I sent letters." "I never got any letters," Damon stammered. I looked at Juliana. She was slowly getting to her feet. The fear in her eyes was being replaced by something else. Malice. Denial. She refused to accept that her reign was over. She refused to accept that the old man she had kicked and starved was the patriarch she had robbed. "He is lying," Juliana spat. She smoothed her dress, trying to regain some shred of authority. "Look at him, Damon. He is a con artist. He is just a crazy old veteran who looks a bit like your father. Your father died 10 years ago. This is just some sick game to get money out of us." She turned to me, a sneer twisting her lips. "Nice try, old man. But you messed up. Silas Thorne is dead. I have the death certificate. I have the insurance payout. You are nobody. Just a ghost story." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a sheep that thinks it can fight back. "A ghost story," I repeated. "You are right, Juliana. I am a ghost. I have been a ghost in this house for 7 days. And do you know what ghosts do?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. "They watch," I said. I pointed the remote at the massive 80-inch flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. I hit the power button. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't playing cable news. It was playing a video file labeled The Truth. The first image that appeared was grainy but clear. It was the master bedroom. Juliana was there. But Damon wasn't. She was rolling around on the sheets with Marco, the fitness instructor. They were laughing, drinking champagne. Juliana froze. Her hand went to her mouth. The audio kicked in. "He is such a loser," Juliana's voice said on the screen. "Damon thinks he is a businessman, but he is just a child. As soon as the trust fund clears Marco, we are gone. I am divorcing him and taking half of everything." Damon turned to look at his wife. His eyes were wide with shock. You said you loved me," he whispered. Juliana didn't answer. She was staring at the screen, paralyzed. The video cut. New scene. Damon's office. Damon was on the phone. He was holding a glass of whiskey. "I don't care about the pension fund," Damon was shouting into the phone. "Just liquidate it. I need the cash to pay off the gambling debt." "My mother. Who cares about her? She doesn't need money. She is old. Just forge the signature and get it done." Damon flinched as if he had been slapped. He looked at Clara. "Mom, I didn't mean..." The video cut again. This was the one that made the room turn cold. The kitchen, 3 days ago. Clara was standing by the sink washing dishes. She looked frail and tired. Juliana walked in. She was eating an apple. She took a bite, then threw the core at Clara, hitting her in the back of the head. Missed a spot. Juliana laughed on the video. Clara turned around crying. "Please, Miss Juliana, I am hungry. Can I have some bread?" "No," Juliana said. "Bread is for people who earn money. You are a leech. You sleep in the shed until you learn your place." Then, on the screen, Juliana grabbed Clara's arm and shoved her toward the door. I paused the video on the frame where Juliana's hand was digging into Clara's bruise. I lowered the remote. I looked at Juliana. "Is that a ghost story?" I asked, my voice quiet and dangerous. "Is that a hallucination? Or is that you abusing my wife in the house I built?" Juliana looked around the room. She looked at the lawyers. She looked at Damon. She realized there was no exit. You illegally recorded us," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "That is inadmissible. You can't use that. This is privacy violation." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Privacy violation?" I asked, walking toward her. "You are talking about the law to a man who has operated outside of it for 30 years. Do you think I care about admissibility? I am not taking you to small claims court, Juliana." I threw a thick file folder onto the table next to the ripped contract. It slid across the surface and stopped in front of the operatives. That file contains everything I said: the embezzlement, the tax fraud, the forgery of Clara's signature, the solicitation of illegal loans from the Russian mob, and now the elder abuse. I looked at the 2 men in suits. "Gentlemen, take them away." Damon looked at the men. "Wait, who are they? Are they police?" The tall operative stood up. He pulled a badge from his jacket pocket. It wasn't a police badge, it was a federal badge. "FBI Financial Crimes Division," he said. "We have been working with Captain Thorne for a week. We have seen everything." Damon's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. "No," he cried. "No, please, Dad. Don't let them take me. I am your son. I am Bambi." I looked down at him. The boy I loved was gone. The man on the floor was a stranger. "Bambi didn't steal from his mother," I said. "Bambi didn't leave an old woman to freeze in a shed." I looked at Juliana. She wasn't crying. She was glaring at me with pure hatred. "You planned this," she hissed. "You set us up." "I didn't set you up," I said. "I just gave you a rope. You were the one who tied the noose." The agents moved in. They pulled Damon up. He was dead weight, weeping uncontrollably. They handcuffed him. The click of the metal was loud and final. Then they went for Juliana. She tried to pull away, scratching at the agent's face. "Get off me," she screamed. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," the agent said, spinning her around and cuffing her hands behind her back. "You are inmate number 4092. They dragged them toward the door. As they passed me, Damon looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "Dad," he whispered. "Why?" "Because I promised her," I said, pointing at Clara. "I promised her I would come back, and I promised I would clean up the mess." They dragged them out. The front door slammed shut. The silence returned to the house, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was light. It was clean. I turned to Clara. She was standing by the table, holding onto the back of a chair for support. She was looking at me. Her eyes were clear. The tears were flowing freely now. She took a step toward me, then another. "Silas," she whispered, "you look old." I smiled, the first real smile in a long time. "I am old, Clara," I said. "I am a grandfather who just sent his son to prison." She walked right up to me. She reached up and touched my face, tracing the scar on my chin. "You came back," she said. "I promised," I said. She wrapped her arms around me. She smelled like lavender and soap, the smell of home. I buried my face in her neck, and for the first time in 30 years, I let go. I felt the tears soak into her dress. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I am so sorry I left you with them." "Shh," she soothed, stroking my back. "You are here now. The debt is paid, Silas. The debt is paid." I held her there in the middle of the dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of our past and the hope of our future. We were old. We were broken. But we were together. And in that moment, I knew that the war was finally over. The soldier could rest. The gardener had finished his work. If you are crying right now, hit that like button because I am crying too. But stick around for the final part because you need to see what happened to the house and how Clara and I spent our final years. The ending will restore your faith in justice. The silence that followed the snap of the handcuffs was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum left after a bomb goes off. Damon was on his knees, his expensive suit pants stained with the dust of the floor he had forced his mother to scrub. He was looking up at me with eyes that were no longer seeing a father but a judge, executioner, and ghost all rolled into one. The two federal agents stood like statues behind him and Juliana, their grips firm, their faces impassive. But Damon being Damon, he still tried to find a loophole. He was a drowning man trying to argue with the ocean. "You can't do this!" He stammered, his voice thick with snot and tears. "This is my house. The deed is in my name. I inherited it when you died. You can't just come back from the grave and kick me out. I have rights. I have the title." I walked over to the shredded remains of the contract on the table. I picked up a piece of the heavy bond paper and held it up to the light. "You have nothing. Damon," I said, my voice low and steady, "you never had anything." I reached into the inside pocket of my charcoal suit. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a single blue folder. It was thin, but it carried more weight than a sledgehammer. I tossed it onto the floor in front of him. It slid across the parquet and stopped right against his knees. "Open it," I commanded. Damon's hands were cuffed behind his back so he couldn't touch it. One of the agents leaned down and flipped the cover open. It was a property title. But the name on the owner line wasn't Damon Thorne. It wasn't even Silas Thorne. "Pegasus Holdings Limited." Damon read out loud, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What is this? Who is Pegasus?" "Pegasus is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands," I explained, walking slowly around him, circling him like a shark. "I set it up 30 years ago before I went deep cover. The deed to this estate was never transferred to you because I never legally died. The death certificate you have was a standard agency protocol issuance for operatives missing in action. It allows for insurance payouts, but it does not transfer hard assets held in offshore trusts." I stopped in front of him. "You were never the owner, Damon. You were a squatter in a silk robe. The power of attorney you used to take control of the bank accounts was only valid for maintenance. Every dime you spent on cars, every dime you spent on gambling, and every dime she spent on diamonds was theft. Embezzlement from a corporate entity." Damon's face crumbled. He realized the walls were not just closing in, they were crushing him. But I thought, "You thought you could get away with it because you thought nobody was watching," I said, cutting him off. "You thought the old man in the shed was just a pair of eyes to mock. You didn't know those eyes were recording every transaction, every conversation, and every act of cruelty." I turned my gaze to Juliana. She wasn't crying like Damon. She was seething. She was struggling against the agent's grip, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly entitlement. She looked at me, and she didn't see a tactical genius or a grieving father. She saw something else, something her twisted mind had been taught to hate. "You planned this," she spat. "You dirty, lying old man. You tricked us. You pretended to be a servant. You let me humiliate myself." "I didn't let you do anything, Juliana," I said coldly. "I gave you a choice. Every single day for 7 days I gave you a choice. I offered to help in the garden. You spat on me. Clara asked for food. You starved her. You had 1,000 chances to show a single ounce of humanity. And every time you chose cruelty. I don't need lectures from you," she screamed, lunging forward only to be jerked back by the agent. "You are nothing. You are just some affirmative action hire the government forgot to kill. You think because you have a suit on you are better than me. I belong in this house. My family founded this town while yours was picking cotton." The room went deadly silent. Even the agents looked uncomfortable. Juliana didn't stop. The venom was flowing now, uncorked by fear and rage. "Look at you," she hissed, her eyes wild. "You are just a thug with a badge. And your wife, she is just a senile mule. You both belong in the dirt. You belong in the shed. I should have burned that shed down with you in it." Damon looked at his wife in horror. "Juliana, shut up," he whispered. "Please just shut up." But she couldn't. The mask of the sophisticated socialite had fallen off, revealing the rot underneath. I stood there and took it. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I let her words hang in the air like toxic smoke. When she finally ran out of breath, panting and red-faced, I took one step closer to her. I leaned in until I was inches from her face. I could smell the expensive perfume masking the smell of her sweat. "Are you done?" I asked. She glared at me, defiant to the end. "Go to hell!" I looked at the tall agent holding her arm. "Agent Miller," I said calmly. "Did you catch that last part? Loud and clear?" Captain Miller said, his voice hard as granite. I looked back at Juliana. You made a mistake, Juliana. A very expensive mistake. I pointed to the camera on Agent Miller's vest. The red light was blinking. You are already being charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Those are serious crimes. But what you just did, screaming racial slurs and threats of arson based on race in the presence of federal officers while being arrested. I paused, letting the reality sink in. That triggers a federal hate crime enhancement, I said. Under the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. It allows the judge to triple your sentence. You weren't just looking at 10 years for the fraud. Now you are looking at 30. Minimum. Juliana's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like she had seen her own corpse. Hate crime, she whispered. I nodded. You wanted to be superior, I said. You wanted to be above everyone else. Well, congratulations. You just elevated your status from a common thief to a federal priority. I turned to Agent Miller. Get them out of my house. The agents didn't be gentle this time. They hauled them toward the door. Damon was weeping, dragging his feet, begging for his mother. Mom, help me, he wailed. Mom, don't let them take me. Clara had been standing by the window watching the entire scene in silence. She turned when she heard her son's voice. She looked at him. For a moment, I thought she would break. I thought the mother in her would override the victim. I thought she would ask me to stop. But Clara just looked at him. She looked at the man who had let his wife push her down the stairs. She looked at the man who had pointed a gun at his father. You made your bed, Damon, she said softly. Her voice was sad, but it didn't waver. Now you have to sleep in it. And I hope you find God in there, because you certainly didn't find him here. She turned her back on him. The front door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the mansion, final and absolute. The sirens outside wailed to life, fading into the distance as they dragged my son and his wife toward a future of steel bars and concrete walls. I stood in the center of the foyer. My adrenaline was crashing now, leaving me feeling heavy and old. My ribs were throbbing. My knee was aching. I looked around the house. It was a beautiful house. High ceilings, marble floors, crystal chandeliers. But for the last 30 years, it had been a prison. It had been a stage for a tragedy. I felt a hand on my arm. I looked down. Clara was there. She was holding the blue folder I had thrown at Damon. She placed it on the table. Is it over? She asked. I took her hand. It was warm. It is over, I said. The weeds are pulled. The pests are gone. She looked at the grand staircase where she had fallen. She looked at the kitchen where she had scrubbed floors. I don't like this house, Silas, she whispered. It is too big. It has too many shadows, and it remembers too much. I nodded. I felt the same way. The air here was tainted. We don't have to stay, I said. We can sell it. For real this time. We can take the money and go anywhere. We can go back to Chicago. Or we can go to that little cabin by the lake in Montana we used to talk about. Remember, the one with the porch facing the sunset. Clara smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had seen on her face in years. It lit up her eyes, chasing away the last of the fog. Montana, she said, testing the word. No stairs. Just a porch. And a garden. A real garden. Not for showing off, but for growing things. Yes, I said. Tomatoes. And roses. And no cameras. She squeezed my hand. But first, she said, pulling me toward the kitchen. First, you need to eat. You are still too thin, Mr. Moses. And I believe there is a bottle of wine somewhere that Juliana didn't drink. I laughed. It started as a chuckle, and then it grew until it filled the empty hallway. I put my arm around my wife. My queen. We walked into the kitchen together, not as servants, not as victims, but as the owners of our own destiny. The war was over. The house was empty. But my heart was finally full. If you are cheering for this justice, hit that subscribe button right now, but don't click away yet. The story isn't quite done. In the final part, I am going to show you what we did with the money, and trust me, it is the perfect ending to a soldier's journey. Leave a comment telling me where you would retire if you had $30 million. 3 months is not a long time in the free world. It is a season. It is a financial quarter. It is enough time to grow a patch of tomatoes. But inside the federal correctional system, 3 months is a lifetime. I know this because I spent time in black sites that made federal prison look like a holiday camp. But for people like Damon and Juliana who had never slept on sheets with a thread count lower than 600, this was hell. I sat in the waiting room of the Danbury Federal Correctional Institution. The walls were painted a color I called institutional despair, a pale, peeling green that smelled of bleach and floor wax. I was not wearing the gardener-esque clothes today. I was wearing a navy blue sweater and slacks. I looked like exactly what I was, a grandfather visiting a wayward relative. But inside I was still the operative conducting a post-mission assessment. I had already received the report on Juliana. My contacts in the system were thorough. Juliana was at the Women's camp just down the road. Apparently the transition had been rough. The report said that on her first day in the cafeteria she had tried to send her tray back because the mashed potatoes were lumpy. She had actually snapped her fingers at a prisoner serving food and called her a peasant. That prisoner happened to be a woman named Big T, who was serving 20 years for armed robbery. The result was predictable. Juliana was no longer the queen of the Hamptons. She was currently scrubbing toilets in cell block C with a toothbrush. Her expensive hair extensions had been pulled out during a disagreement over a bar of soap. Her designer skin creams were gone, replaced by generic petroleum jelly. She was learning the hard way that in here money does not buy respect and attitude gets you broken. She had tried to bribe a guard with diamonds she no longer had, and that earned her a week in solitary confinement. She was broken. The venom had been drained out of her not by a gardener, but by the brutal reality of the food chain. But I wasn't here for Juliana. She was a stranger to me. I was here for my son. The buzzer sounded. A heavy steel door slid open with a mechanical grind that echoed in your teeth. Damon walked in. If I hadn't known his DNA, I wouldn't have recognized him. He had lost 30 pounds. His expensive suit was replaced by a baggy khaki jumpsuit that hung off his frame. His hair, which he used to style with $20 gel, was shaved close to his scalp. But it was his eyes that got me. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was fear. He shuffled to the metal table and sat down. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He looked at the handcuffs, then he looked at me. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was cracked and dry. I didn't smile. I didn't reach out to hold his hand. I just nodded. "Hello, Damon." He started to cry. It wasn't the loud sobbing of the day he was arrested. It was a quiet, defeated weeping. "Get me out of here, Dad," he pleaded, wiping his nose on his shoulder because his hands were restrained. "Please, I can't take it. The guy in the cell next to me screams all night. The food, it tastes like cardboard. I am scared, Dad. I am so scared." I watched him. Part of me, the father part, wanted to fix it, wanted to call the expensive lawyers and pull strings. But the soldier part, the part that respects consequences, held firm. "You are safe, Damon," I said, my voice calm. "You are in a minimum security wing. Nobody is going to hurt you unless you give them a reason. You have a bed. You have food. It is more than you gave your mother." Damon flinched. "I am sorry," he choked out. "I am so sorry about Mom." I was weak. "Juliana, she made me do it. She said we needed the money." I leaned forward. The metal chair scraped against the floor. "Stop," I commanded. Damon froze. "Do not blame her," I said. "She is a predator, yes. But you held the gun, Damon. You signed the papers. You watched your mother eating bread crusts, and you did nothing. A man takes responsibility for his actions. A child blames the influence of others. Which one are you today?" Damon looked down at the table. "A child," he whispered. "I am a child. I don't know how to be anything else." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "But you have the money, Dad. The lawyers told me. You have everything. The house, the trust, the offshore accounts. You could bail me out. You could pay for an appeal. Please, just give me a chance. I need money for the commissary. I need to buy protection." I reached into my bag. Damon's eyes lit up. His eyes. He thought I was pulling out a checkbook. He thought I was pulling out a stack of cash. I pulled out a book. It was a thin book, soft cover, bright primary colors on the cover. It was a children's book. The title was printed in large, friendly letters. "My First Book of Ethics, How to Be a Good Person." I slid it across the metal table. Damon stared at it. He looked confused. "What is this?" he asked. "It is your inheritance," I said. "Dad, is this a joke?" "No, Damon," I said. "I realize that I made a mistake raising you. I gave you cars. I gave you college tuition. I gave you a job you didn't earn. I tried to start you at the finish line, But I forgot to teach you the basics. I forgot to teach you that stealing is wrong, that lying is wrong, that hurting the weak is the act of a coward. I tapped the cover of the book. So we are starting over. Grade 1, read it, memorize it. Damon looked at the book like it was a poisonous snake. I need money, he hissed. I don't need a book. You have never earned $1 in your life, I said. And you are not getting another penny from me. Not now. Not ever. The trust is closed to you, Damon. The house is sold. Sold, he gasped. Yes, I said. I sold it yesterday. To a nice family with 3 kids and a dog. They are going to fill that house with love, not schemes. And the money from the sale? I leaned back, crossing my arms. I donated it. Every cent. To the Veteran Support Fund and the Elder Abuse Prevention Network. Damon's jaw dropped. You gave away $30 million. I didn't give it away, I corrected. I invested it in people who deserve it. Damon slumped in his chair. He looked completely defeated. He realized finally that the bank of Dad was not just closed, it was demolished. So what do I do? He whispered, tears streaming down his face again. What am I supposed to do when I get out? I have a felony record. I have no money. I have no home. I am 40 years old and I have nothing. I looked at him, and for the first time in this entire nightmare, I softened just a fraction. You have your hands, I said. He looked at his cuffed hands. When you get out, Damon, I said, go to a diner. Ask for a job washing dishes. It is honest work. It is hot. It is hard. Your hands will get chapped. Your back will ache. But at the end of the day, you will hold a few dollars that you actually earned. And that bread you buy with those dollars, it will taste better than any steak you ever ate in that mansion. I stood up. Start there, I said. Start at the sink. Wash away the grease. Wash away the entitlement. And maybe, just maybe, if you can hold that job for a year, if you can prove to me that you can be a man who serves others instead of using them, maybe we can have coffee. Damon looked up. A tiny flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. Not hope for money, but hope for redemption. Coffee, he asked. Just coffee, I said. But you are paying. I turned to leave. Dad, he called out. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. Does Mom hate me? I looked at the gray steel door in front of me. Your mother doesn't know how to hate, I said. That is why she is strong, and that is why you failed to break her. She prays for you, Damon, every night. She prays that you find your soul in here. Don't disappoint her again. I signaled the guard. The door buzzed open. I walked out of the prison into the bright, blinding sunlight. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of exhaust fumes and cut grass, but to me it tasted like freedom. I had pruned the branch. It was painful. It was brutal. But it was necessary. Now it was up to the branch to see if it could grow roots of its own. I walked to the parking lot where a modest sedan was waiting. Not a limousine, just a rental car. I opened the passenger door. Clara was sitting there. She looked beautiful. She was wearing a straw hat and holding a map. She looked up at me anxiously. Did you see him? She asked. I nodded, buckling my seatbelt. I saw him. Is he okay? He is where he needs to be. Clara, I said, starting the engine. He is in school. The tuition is expensive, but I think he is finally listening to the teacher. Clara nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. She didn't ask for details. She trusted me. Where to, Mr. Moses? She asked, smiling a little, using the old nickname. I looked at the map in her lap. I pointed to a blue line winding through the mountains of Montana. West, I said, until we run out of road, and then we plant a garden. She reached over and took my hand. Drive, she said. I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the prison behind, leaving the Hamptons behind, leaving the ghosts behind. The rearview mirror showed nothing but an empty road. The windshield showed the horizon. We were old, we were scarred, but we were free. And that, my friends, is how you win a war. You don't burn the village down. You save the innocent, you educate the guilty, and then you walk away and find your own peace. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. But wait, I have one last surprise for you. You are wondering what happened to the diamonds, right? The ones Juliana hid in the floor. Well, let's just say the new owners found a very interesting surprise when they renovated the bathroom. Join me in the final epilogue to find out who really got the last laugh. The flight to Zurich was the first time I had flown commercial in 20 years, but I booked 2 first-class seats, not for the champagne, but for the privacy. I needed to watch her. I needed to make sure that the demons of the Hamptons did not follow us across the Atlantic. Clara slept for most of the flight, her head resting on my shoulder. Every time the plane hit a pocket of turbulence, she would startle awake, her hands grasping for something solid. And every time I was there, I was the solid thing. I would whisper to her that we were safe, that the bad men were gone, and she would drift back into a medicated slumber. Switzerland is a country built on discretion and precision. 2 things I value above all else. The facility I chose was called Le Sanctuaire. It was nestled in the foothills of the Alps overlooking Lake Geneva. It did not look like a hospital. It looked like a castle that had decided to stop fighting wars and start healing souls. The walls were stone. The windows were tall and the air smelled of pine needles and snow. It cost $20,000 a month. I paid for 5 years in advance. The first week was the hardest. The doctors told me that the cocktail of cheap antipsychotics and sedatives Juliana had been feeding her had created a chemical dependency. We had to detox her. We had to flush the poison out of her system before we could see what was left of her mind. I did not leave her side. I slept in a chair in the corner of her room. When she shook from withdrawal, I held her hands. When she cried out names from the past, calling for Damon, calling for Juliana, begging them not to lock her in the shed, I was there to rewrite the narrative. You are not in the shed, Clara. I would say, over and over again like a mantra. You are in the mountains. You are a queen. By the 2nd month, the physical symptoms had subsided. The shaking stopped. Her appetite returned. The color came back to her cheeks, replacing the gray pallor of the cellar. She gained weight. She started to look like the woman I had married 30 years ago. But the mind is a battlefield that is harder to map than any jungle I ever fought in. The doctors were honest with me. They sat me down in an office with a view of the lake. They showed me scans of her brain. Captain Thorne, the head neurologist, said, his voice soft but professional. We have cleared the chemical fog, but the underlying condition, Alzheimer, is progressive. The trauma she suffered accelerated it. She will have good days and she will have bad days. Her memory is like a book with torn pages. Some chapters are there clear as crystal. Others are gone forever. I looked at the scans. I saw the gaps. I saw the losses. Can she be happy, I asked. That is all I care about. I don't care if she remembers the quadratic formula or the capital of Nebraska. Can she feel joy? The doctor smiled. Yes, she can feel joy. The emotional memory often outlasts the factual memory. She might not remember your name every day, but she will remember how you make her feel. That was enough for me. I established a routine. A soldier needs a routine, and so does a patient. We woke up at 7. We had breakfast on the terrace, oatmeal with fresh berries and coffee with plenty of cream, just the way she liked it. Then we walked. We walked along the shores of Lake Geneva. The water was a piercing blue, cold and deep, reflecting the snow-capped peaks. It was vast and silent. It was the complete opposite of the claustrophobic mansion with its screaming inhabitants. I watched her rediscover the world. She would stop to look at a swan gliding on the water. She would pick up a pine cone and marvel at its texture. She was seeing everything for the first time. One afternoon, about 3 months after we arrived, we were sitting on our favorite bench. It was made of weathered teak facing the sunset. The sky was turning purple and gold. The air was getting chilly, so I took off my coat and draped it around her shoulders. She looked at the coat. She touched the wool fabric. This is a nice coat, she said. Heavy, good for winter. It is yours, I said. She smiled, wrapped herself tighter in it. She looked out at the water, watching the ferries cross from Lausanne to Evian. She looked peaceful. The tension that had defined her face for years, the permanent flinch of a woman expecting a blow, was gone. She turned to me. Her eyes were bright, clear, and innocent. You are very kind to me, she said. I felt a lump in my throat. I am just doing my job. She tilted her head, studying my face. She traced the line of my jaw with her eyes. She looked at my hands, scarred and weathered, resting on my knees. You are always here, she said. Every morning, every night. You cut my meat for me. You read to me. You chase the bad dreams away. I nodded. I wasn't trusting my voice. She looked down at her hands. The calluses from the scrubbing brush were fading, but her knuckles were still swollen from arthritis and years of labor. "I had a husband once," she said softly. I froze. I stopped breathing. "Oh," I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "What was he like?" "He was strong," she said. "He was a soldier. He went away to save the world. He told me to wait. He said, 'Wait for me, Clara. I will come back.'" She paused, looking at the horizon. "Did he come back?" I asked the question hanging in the cold air. Clara frowned. A shadow passed over her face. "A fragment of the dark times, I don't know," she whispered. "Sometimes I think he did, but then there was so much noise, and the shed, and the cold, I think he might have gotten lost. Or maybe I got lost." She looked back at me, and in that moment the connection snapped. The neural pathway that linked my face to the name Silas Thorne severed. She wasn't looking at her husband. She was looking at a stranger. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice polite and formal. "I don't mean to be rude. I know you helped me, but I don't recall your name." She leaned in closer, her eyes searching mine. "Who are you?" The question hit me harder than a bullet. It pierced the armor I had built around my heart. For 30 years I had fought to get back to her. I had destroyed my enemies. I had reclaimed my fortune. I had dragged her out of hell. And yet here at the finish line she didn't know who I was. I could have told her. I could have pulled out the photos. I could have said, "I am Silas. I am your husband. Remember the jazz club. Remember the wedding." But I realized something in that moment. Silas was the man who left. Silas was the ghost who haunted her. Silas was the reason she had suffered, because my absence created the vacuum that Damon and Juliana filled with hate. She didn't need Silas the soldier. She didn't need the man who brought the war home. She needed someone else. I looked at her. I saw the woman I loved more than life itself. And I saw that she was happy. She felt safe. That was the victory. The name didn't matter. The mission was accomplished. I smiled. It was a gentle smile, a smile that reached my eyes. I reached out and took her hand. It was warm in mine. "I am the gardener," I said. She blinked, surprised. "The gardener?" "Yes," I said. "I am here to tend the soil. I am here to water the flowers. And most importantly, I am here to clear the weeds. I am going to make sure that no thorns ever touch you again." Clara looked at me. She processed the words. The gardener. Someone who cares for things. Someone who protects beauty. Someone who stays. She liked that answer. "The gardener," she repeated, testing the sound of it. "That is a good job, a very important job." She squeezed my hand. "Well, Mr. Gardener," she said, leaning her head back on my shoulder, "the sun is going down, and I believe the flowers are getting cold. Shall we go inside?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, standing up and offering her my arm. "Let's go home." We walked back up the path toward the stone castle. The wind blew through the trees, whispering through the branches. I was no longer Captain Silas Thorne. I was no longer Spectre. I was no longer the man with the gun. I was the gardener. And looking at the woman walking beside me, safe and warm, I knew it was the best rank I had ever held. The war was truly over. The silence was not empty. It was full of peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to look over my shoulder. I only needed to look at her. If you have ever loved someone enough to let go of your own ego, hit that like button. But stay tuned, because in the final epilogue, I am going to reveal the one secret I kept from everyone. The secret hidden in the bathroom floor of the mansion. You won't believe what the new owners found. The moving trucks were gone. The driveway where the Bentleys and Porsches used to park was empty. The oil stains from the leaking engines of the Russian SUVs had been power washed away, leaving the cobblestones clean and gray under the morning sun. I stood at the wrought iron gate, looking at the mansion one last time. It looked different now, without the noise, without the greed, without the people who had poisoned it. The house looked almost innocent. It was just a pile of stone and glass waiting for a new family to fill it with better memories. I walked up the driveway. My steps echoed in the silence. I wasn't wearing the gardener's rags, and I wasn't wearing the charcoal suit. I was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. I was dressed for Montana. I was dressed for a porch and a sunset. But I had one last piece of business to attend to. one last ritual to perform before I could truly leave the ghost of Spectre behind. I walked around to the backyard to the old stone incinerator that stood near the edge of the property. It was a relic from the 1920s, a heavy brick chimney used to burn garden waste. I dropped my duffel bag on the grass. I unzipped it. Inside was the gear, the tools of my trade, the black tactical vest with the ceramic plates, the night vision goggles, the encrypted satellite phone, the dossier on my own son, and the mask, the latex and makeup kit I had used to become Moses. I looked at these things. They had saved my life. They had helped me save Clara, but they were heavy. They carried the weight of 30 years of deception. I threw the vest into the incinerator. I threw the phone in after it. I threw the files. I struck a match. The flame flared up bright orange against the gray sky. I tossed it in. The fire caught instantly. I watched the smoke rise. It was black and thick, twisting into the air like a dark spirit finally being released. I watched the edges of the dossier curl and blacken. I watched the face of Spectre melt away. "Goodbye," I whispered. I stood there until the fire burned down to ash. I felt lighter. The tension in my shoulders, the constant hypervigilance that had defined my existence for 3 decades began to fade. I wasn't a commander anymore. I wasn't a spy. I was just a man. "Silas." A voice called out from the patio. I turned around. Elias was standing there. My banker, my lawyer, my friend. He was holding a manila envelope and a small rectangular object wrapped in brown paper. He walked over to me, his shoes crunching on the dry autumn leaves. He looked at the smoking incinerator and nodded. "Is it done?" he asked. "It is done," I said, kicking dirt over the embers. "The house is officially transferred. The charity received the funds this morning. The Veterans Support Fund is calling it the Thorn Grant. It will build housing for 50 homeless vets." Elias smiled. "That is a good legacy, Silas. Better than this stone mausoleum." He handed me the manila envelope. "These are the deeds to the cabin in Montana," he said. "It is fully paid for. It is remote. It is quiet. And the soil is excellent for gardening." I took the envelope. "Thank you, Elias." "There is one more thing," he said, holding out the wrapped package. "The movers found this behind the master bedroom wall paneling. It looks like it slipped behind the safe years ago. We almost threw it away, but I recognized the handwriting on the back. I took the package. It was heavy. I tore off the brown paper. It was a picture frame, old silver tarnished by time. Inside was a photograph of Clara and me taken on our honeymoon in 1975. We were standing on a pier in Atlantic City. The wind was blowing her hair across her face, and I was laughing. We looked so young, so invincible. I turned the frame over. The backing was loose. A piece of folded yellow legal paper was tucked inside. I pulled it out. My hands, the hands that had disarmed bombs and strangled sentries, were shaking. I unfolded the paper. The date at the top was June 14th, 2003, 20 years ago. 5 years after I had supposedly died in the car bomb. 10 years before the Alzheimer's truly set in. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Clara's. Elegant flowing script. "My dearest Silas, I know you are not dead. Everyone tells me you are. The government sent a flag. Damon cries at night. But I know the truth. I saw the news report about the embassy in Belgrade. I saw the man in the background for just a split second. He was wearing the scarf I knitted for you, the gray one with the missed stitch in the corner. You were alive. I know why you have to stay away. I know you are protecting us from the bad men who chase you. But Silas, the wolves are already here. They are in our house. Damon is weak. He listens to that woman Juliana. They want the money, they want the control. If I fight them, they will hurt me. If I try to leave, they will find me. And if they find me, they might find you. So I have made a choice. A soldier's choice. I am going to hide. Not in a safe house, but inside my own mind. They think I am getting forgetful. They think I am weak. I will let them believe it. I will let them think I am crazy. If I am crazy, they won't fear me. If I am crazy, they will ignore me. They will let me stay in the corner and they won't look for the secrets I keep. I will play the fool Silas. I will play the broken old woman. I will endure the insults. I will endure the cold. I will do whatever it takes to stay alive and keep this house standing until you come home. Because I know you will come home. You promised. I will wait for you, my love. Even if my mind truly starts to fade, my heart will hold the door open. Come back and clean up this mess. I am tired of holding the broom. Love forever, Clara. I fell to my knees. The grass was wet, but I didn't feel it. I held the letter to my chest and sobbed. I had thought I was the hero. I thought I was the one making the sacrifice, living in the shadows to keep her safe. I thought I was the strong one, but I was wrong. She was the operative. She was the one who had gone deep cover right in the belly of the beast. She had feigned madness to survive. She had used her own dignity as a shield to protect my secrets. She had endured 20 years of Juliana's cruelty, 20 years of Damon's neglect just to hold the ground, just to be here when I returned. She hadn't lost her mind. She had sacrificed it for me. Elias put a hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He just let me weep. After a long time, I stood up. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I looked at the house one last time. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was a battlefield where the bravest soldier I ever knew had fought a silent war for 2 decades. She won, I whispered. She beat them all. I put the letter in my pocket right next to my heart. Let's go, Elias, I said, picking up the picture frame. The gardener has a date with his queen. We walked to the car. I didn't look back at the incinerator. I didn't look back at the mansion. I drove to the clinic. When I walked into Clara's room, she was sitting by the window watching the snow fall on the Alps. She turned and smiled at me. "Hello, Mr. Gardner," she said. "You look sad today. Did the weeds give you trouble?" I walked over and knelt beside her chair. I took her hand and kissed her knuckles. "No, ma'am," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "The weeds are gone. I found out that my wife is the bravest woman in the world." See, Clara laughed a soft musical sound. "She must be very special," she said, patting my cheek. "She is," I said. "She saved my life." I stood up. "Ready to go to Montana?" I asked. Clara stood up. She picked up her bag. "Is there a porch?" she asked. "A big one, I promised. And a swing." "Then let's go," she said, taking my arm. "I am tired of waiting." We walked out of the clinic and into the rest of our lives. The snow was falling, covering the world in a blanket of white, washing away the past, making everything new again. True power isn't about the weapons you carry or the wars you fought in the shadows. It's about the silent endurance of love. I spent 30 years protecting my country, thinking I was a hero, only to realize I failed to protect my own queen from the wolves inside our den. Justice isn't just punishment, it's restoration. Money can build a mansion, but only loyalty builds a home. And remember, the most dangerous person in the room is never the one shouting threats. It's the gardener quietly sharpening his shears in the corner. And that is the end of my mission. But the fight for justice never really ends, does it? If you enjoyed this story of revenge and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And I want to ask you one final question. If you found out your partner had sacrificed their sanity to save you, what would you do to repay them? Let me know in the comments below. I will be reading them from the porch in Montana while Clara tends to her roses. Until next time, stay sharp and watch out for the quiet ones.